welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. It's a pretty significant one. And I know a number of people are looking forward to the discussion tonight. So we're going to have an agenda overview from staff. I do want people to understand that items 4 and 5, the plan is to have separate discussion and votes on those, although there's some interrelationship between those. We'll have a separate discussion and vote on those items. So I'll turn it over to staff at this point.
All right, thank you, David. So good evening, everyone. Welcome task force members and the public, members of the public. Jared Hart with the Planning Division. So on the agenda tonight, we have the approval of the September task force meeting synopsis. Then we're gonna move on to presentations by planning staff on Coyote Valley and redistribution of planned growth. I also want to note that county planning staff will also be providing information on agenda item 4 on Coyote Valley. That'll be followed by public comment and then task force discussion and recommendations. After the meeting is adjourned, for public attendees, there'll be a virtual meeting survey that pops up in your browser. It'd be great if you could, provide us feedback on our virtual meeting format. The survey is pretty short. And with that, David, I'll hand it back to you for approval of September's meeting synopsis.
All right, is there a motion on that?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion?
I do have this is Harvey Darnell. I have a comment. I looked at for some comments I made that I was concerned that the same comment I made in 2009, 8, 11, whenever it was, in the original, is that by pushing down the VMT, and if the authority is not able to provide enough public transportation, we're dooming the lower economic strata in the valley. So I want some kind of comment that I made like that.
Can you just say that one time and we can direct staff to include that in there?
Because of the fact that Valley Transportation Authority is constantly under pressure, they aren't able to increase service, or they always seem to decrease service. Those people who we place in housing and whatever without transportation are going to suffer.
Okay. Is the maker of the motion agreeable to adding those comments to the synopsis?
Yes.
Second, is that person who seconded agreeable to that as well?
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion then on the motion? Anyone in opposition to the motion? Hearing none, it is approved. Thank you. So we'll go to item 4, the staff presentation on the long-term future of Coyote Valley.
All right, thank you, David. Okay, so this item's on Coyote Valley, as David said. So specifically, the scope of work approved by City Council was to analyze potential redistribution of planned jobs from North Coyote Valley and potential effects upon the city that could result from the loss of employment lands. Additionally, the staff and the task force were also tasked with considering the long-term future of Coyote Valley to achieve objectives such as preservation of open space and habitat, flood and groundwater protection, agriculture, climate change resiliency, and passive recreation. So I want to give just a brief overview of the Coyote Valley planning area and the general plan's existing land use designations. So Coyote Valley is located in the southern reaches of San Jose and is broken up by 3 distinct planning areas in the general plan, covering over 7,000 acres. You have North Coyote Valley, which is designated as an employment growth area for industrial park uses. That's shown in the blue and labeled on the map on the slide. Existing uses there are primarily agriculture, with the exception of the IBM Silicon Valley Lab, Gavilan College Public Safety Training Center, and then the Metcalf Energy Center as well. Mid-Coyote Valley is designated as an urban reserve in the general plan, not to be developed within the time frame of the plan. Mid-Coyote is also, it's outside the city's urban service area, and the predominant land use there is also agriculture. And although there's some, there also is some commercial, industrial, and residential uses located in Mid-Coyote as well. Most of those are east of Monterey Highway there, Monterey Road. The South Coyote Valley Greenbelt is located outside the city's urban growth boundary, and it's actually the most developed and parcelized planning area. It's got a mixture of residential, agriculture, and other uses, such as the Coyote Creek Golf Club. So planning in Coyote Valley has a long and storied history. It's really been an important component of the city's general plan since the 1960s. Actually, in fact, the city's first general plan designated north and parts of South Coyote Valley for industrial uses, and then other areas for residential uses. This changed with General Plan 75, which designated most of Coyote Valley for agriculture and limited low-density residential. But then this changed again in the 80s with the Horizon 2000 General Plan, which designated North Coyote Valley for industrial uses and established the urban reserve and South Coyote Greenbelt that we know today. The San Jose 2020 General Plan, adopted in 1994, established the urban growth boundary, and then in 2002, in response to development interest, really spurred by the dot-com boom at the time, the City Council initiated a specific plan process to prepare a plan for development of 50,000 jobs and 25,000 housing units in North and Mid-Coyote. So that the specific plan effort ended in 2008 and actually was ultimately never completed. And then consideration of development in Coyote Valley was deferred to the Envision 2040 General Plan Comprehensive Update, which by many of you on the task force participated in. The result there was that North Coyote was maintained as an employment growth area. The urban reserve was left in place but not planned for development during the time frame of the general plan, so 2040. And then the Greenbelt was maintained as a permanent non-urban buffer between us and Morgan Hill. So staff, as I mentioned, staff in the task force have been tasked with revisiting this topic, and staff is proposing a new vision for Coyote Valley based on changes in planning context and natural and agricultural resources in the valley. So staff's new long-term vision reflects the many current general plan goals and recognizes Coyote Valley as a unique asset to San Jose that should be preserved as a resource for the community, and which furthers the city's goals of environmental sustainability, enhancement of open space, and support of agriculture in the non-urban areas of the city, as well as protecting critical linkages for wildlife movement. So since adoption of the general plan in 2011, there's been a handful of key changes in planning context related to Coyote Valley. The most significant of which is Measure T, which I think everyone's probably familiar with. It was a $650 million disaster preparedness, public safety, and infrastructure bond that was passed by San Jose voters in 2018. This allocated $50 million for acquisition of land associated with water quality and flood protection. So then in 2019, using those Measure T funds, the City Council approved a $96 million purchase with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority and the Peninsula Open Space Trust of 937 acres in North Coyote Valley to create a natural preserve. And that's shown on the map, the hashed area on the slide and the map there. So excluding properties that are already developed with urban uses, this effectively leaves approximately 314 acres of remaining developable land with an industrial park designation. And again, and that is shown on the map as well in the teal or turquoise color. That's also attachment C in the task force packet. So two other key actions taken by City Council recently are adoption of Climate Smart San Jose and City Council Policy 5-1. Both of those were approved in February of 2018. Climate Smart San Jose is it's a plan that charts a path for reducing carbon emissions in San Jose in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. And one of the strategies in the plan is creating jobs in San Jose that are transit accessible and which can reduce the need for commuter car trips. City Council Policy 5-1 established vehicle miles traveled, known as VMT, is the primary metric for evaluating transportation impacts of new development projects under CEQA. Of course, VMT was highlighted. You probably recognize the map from our last meeting. This was highlighted last month by Department of Transportation staff, and the policy focuses on facilitating low VMT development. Coyote Valley, being at the southernmost end of San Jose, really lacks transportation options and has the highest VMT in the city for jobs. Another important plan adopted in 2018 by the County Board of Supervisors was the Santa Clara Valley Agricultural Plan, which its purpose is to protect agriculture lands as a long-term resource and minimize the impacts of climate change. The plan identifies an agriculture resource area for the county, including Mid and South Coyote Valley, and lays out strategies to support agriculture and the agriculture industry in our county. Some of the actions include creating consistency in the designation of agriculture areas between the county and the cities and alignment of the general plan policies around agriculture. Other strategies include preventing the establishment of incompatible uses to agriculture and prevention of the conversion of ag lands into rural ranchettes. Let's see what, go back, slide there. Okay, so other policy items to highlight are Plan Bay Area 2040. So this was adopted in 2017, which is it's a state mandated transportation and land use plan developed by Metropolitan Transportation Commission and ABAG, Association of Bay Area Governments, which looks at how the Bay Area region will grow and identifies strategies focused on creating really a more sustainable and equitable future for our region. In Plan Bay Area, most of Coyote Valley is located within a priority conservation areas, and these are identified as regionally significant open space. Also, State Assembly Bill 948, authored by Assembly Member Ash Kalra, was signed into law in 2019 and designates over 17,000 acres in Coyote Valley, including North, Mid, and South, as a resource of statewide significance. Also, just this month, Governor Newsom issued Executive Order N8220, which established a goal for conserving 30% of the state's natural and working lands, which is supported by the recent purchase of lands in North Coyote by the city, OSA, and Post. So speaking of, speaking to natural resources in Coyote Valley, studies have documented the ecological value of the area for rare and endangered species. And Coyote Valley has been identified as a top priority for regional conservation efforts, particularly because it's the last intact valley floor connection between the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Diablo Mountain Range. The general plan recognizes this and includes goals and policies to minimize adverse effects of development on wildlife movement. Coyote Valley also accounts for almost 50% of undeveloped aquifer recharge areas for Silicon Valley. And based on studies by the Santa Clara Valley Water District, it's highly vulnerable to contaminant releases due to its shallow groundwater depth and high permeability. Similar to wildlife linkages The general plan includes policies to protect groundwater by discouraging the location of new development with the potential to impact groundwater quality in areas identified as having a high degree of aquifer vulnerability by valley water. So in addition to natural resources, Coyote Valley is also known for its agriculture resources. Much of the valley is classified as farmland of statewide importance and is having Class 1 soils, which is the most productive soils for agriculture. Major crops today include hay, Asian vegetables, mushrooms, and walnuts. Some of the primary challenges to note for farming, not just in Coyote Valley, but overall in the county, include proliferation of rural ranchettes, large number of small lots, labor challenges, incompatible uses, and also land held for speculation, which is when owners of agriculture properties don't use or lease their land for agriculture, or if they do lease the land for farming, it's for uses that have not much or no real long-term investment, like hay farming. So again, the general plan recognizes these resources and includes goals and policies to protect agriculture lands, to facilitate production and provide access to local foods, as well as to promote environmental, fiscal, and economic benefits of rural agricultural lands. So to offer some more context around agriculture and provide some information and policy and program work going on at the county level on this topic, I'd like to introduce Michael Meeham, Senior Planner with the County Department of Planning and Development. So I'm going to stop my share and Michael, you can pick it up from there.
Hi, good evening. Before Michael starts, just a quick introduction. I'm not Michael, I'm Rob Easton. I'm the Planning Division Manager in the county. Nice to see you all this evening and recognize a few faces and at least one County Planning Commissioner that's on your task force. Just a few things. We're really happy to be here tonight. We always see the county in a symbiotic relationship to the cities. The cities are responsible for urban development, services to our urban residents. We see ourselves as stewards of the land and resource conservation. Our general plan since 1980 has focused on our rural areas really for resource conservation, ag preservation, open space preservation. And really, we see ourselves in that symbiotic relationship of stewards of those lands as sort of an enveloping role outside of the cities. Had a special relationship with the city over many years. A lot of those policies are embedded both in your general plan and ours. And we have a layer of other agreements that reinforce those. And very happy tonight to see the staff direction. Coyote Valley, as you know, is a special place. And for us, we've done a lot of policies and programs over the years that look to really sustain it in long-term agriculture. And the actions the city is taking now, I think, will really reinforce and sort of weed out some legacy issues we're dealing with in trying to keep it in agriculture. With that, I'll hand it over to Michael. We really want to present to you kind of two big things. One is, what are the investments the county's doing into agriculture in Coyote Valley and the rest, specifically Coyote Valley and some of the policies we're making. And then give you a snapshot of what's happening out there. We really do have folks out there that every day are doing farming in that area, and you see the crops that come to your tables. It's not just theory and policy. It's folks actually getting out there and working the land. So with that, I'll hand it over to Michael.
Thanks, Rob. Good evening. Thank you to the city staff and the task force for this opportunity to make a short presentation on the county's work pertinent to this subject of agricultural preservation and viability in Coyote Valley. So the county's backdrop for the issues being discussed tonight really starts and ends with our general plan. For 26 years now, it's called for the preservation of the open space and working lands of Coyote Valley through our exclusive agricultural zoning and with 40-acre lot minimums. As Jared mentioned, in early 2018, the county's efforts to preserve agricultural lands and the economic viability of farm and ranch operations significantly ramped up through the development and passage of the Santa Clara Valley Agricultural Plan. For 7 months in 2018, our Agricultural Preservation Task Force met monthly to consider the challenges and opportunities facing the ag sector. And last year, our Board of Supervisors adopted a bundle of recommendations, which we have been busy implementing. And I'll get to some of those in just a moment. Earlier this year, the Santa Clara Valley, or rather the Santa Clara County Food Systems Alliance prepared a robust follow-up to the Ag Plan, focusing specifically on the challenges and opportunities facing operations on smaller parcels in the county. And back to our general plan, we are in the midst of initiating an update that will take climate change resiliency as one of its focuses, and in which the preservation of working lands will play a central role. The City of San Jose's recommendations tonight, as Rob mentioned, come at an opportune moment in the county's own planning and synergize with our long-term strategies for the agricultural lands of Coyote Valley. So importantly, the county's work to preserve agricultural lands and their economic viability is rooted in an interest to mitigate and adapt to our region's climate change impacts. The funding for much of our policy and preservation work thus far has come from the state's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, generated through cap and trade auctions, which comes with an explicit nexus to reduce sprawl development and the incredible emissions from increased vehicle miles traveled that result. Analysis that we conducted as part of our Ag Plan found that specific to Santa Clara County, 1 acre of farmland will on average produce 77 times fewer emissions than the most likely conversion to another use. This is a dramatic difference and by and large the result of increased traffic. Lastly, the county's work aims to really amplify and create incentives for the co-benefits of agriculture, specifically the ecosystem services provided by working lands, such as atmospheric carbon sequestration, flood and wildfire mitigation, and groundwater recharge. Both the Ag Plan and the Small Farms Report each found that preservation and land access were really the fundamental barriers to the sustained economic viability of farmland in our county. The specter of development on those farmlands has long resulted in short-term leases, as Jared mentioned, which results in instability and disincentivizes the investment and innovation in ag businesses. Many of the most ambitious farmers that we spoke with as a part of these 2 studies stated clearly that their chief obstacle to success was secure access to land that was being held in many cases as a speculative investment and leased out to farmers for only months at a time. This is a difficult barrier to overcome, and the county has been working to address the many challenges that farmers and ranchers face through our implementation of the Ag Plan. To date, we've piloted an agricultural conservation easement program, an agricultural resilience incentive grant program to fund carbon farming practices in the Valley, most recently permit streamlining and expanded options for ag employee housing. And we're currently undertaking the creation of a farmland security zone and an update to our county's Williamson Act guidelines. Significant update is also on the horizon for our rural zoning that will align with city staff's recommendations tonight, including the introduction of residential land development standards. So to conclude, as Rob mentioned, we wanted to share some excerpts from the recent Small Farms Report, in particular to highlight those individuals who are often missing from these discussions, the newer and smaller farms, the immigrant and beginning operations that are often, frankly, too busy to participate in these meetings. I would encourage all who are interested to seek out that report. It's available online, and I believe we'll link it as part of tonight's presentation, and really study the farmer profiles that were conducted there, because often these are stories that we don't hear. And finally, we're lucky to have, I believe, Sam Thorpe of Spade and Plow, one of our relatively new small farms in the Valley, in attendance here tonight, and I believe he'll be available for any questions from the task force later on. And so will myself and County Planning Manager Rob Eastwood be available later on for any questions. So thank you.
Okay, Jared, is there any further staff presentation at this point?
Yes, I'll complete the presentation on our end. Okay, so thank you, Michael and Rob. So as mentioned, Coyote Valley and North Coyote Valley in particular has been planned for campus industrial uses for over 3 decades. With the city, OSA, and Post's purchase of the 937 acres of land I mentioned earlier for preservation, only approximately 314 acres located south of Bailey Road remain available for industrial development. One of the components of the 4-year review scope of work was to analyze the redistribution of planned jobs from North Coyote Valley and potential economic impacts of this. To assist with this work, staff brought on board an economic consultant, Strategic Economics, to conduct an analysis of the potential redistribution of planned growth and help identify strategies to accommodate future economic growth in San Jose. The full report was included in task force packet, and Dina Belzer, President of Strategic Economics, is here tonight and is available to answer questions from the task force on the report. So historically, the general plan's vision for North Coyote Valley was for campus industrial uses where technology companies could build campuses where all their functions, including administration, R&D, and manufacturing, could all be consolidated on one site. However, besides the IBM Silicon Valley lab, really large-scale industrial development has not occurred in Coyote Valley. The city's consultant analyzed industry trends and projected job growth by ABAG, as well as the last 10 years of employment growth in industrial park designated lands in North and South San Jose, and also conducted interviews with experienced industrial developers. So based on the analysis, staff found that there's little to no demand for traditional campus industrial office uses in North Coyote Valley. And it's anticipated if employment users located in North Coyote Valley today, it would be industrial-based industries that typically occupy more your horizontal building types, such as manufacturing, transportation, and warehouse housing uses. Based on the interviews with industrial developers, the market demand in Coyote Valley is really what we found was primarily for large-scale logistics buildings for warehousing and distribution, since these types of users are increasingly focused on last-mile delivery logistics. But what we also found is actually there's actually a higher preference for locating these uses closer to Interstate 880 and Highway 237 in North San Jose. So looking at kind of based on the characteristics of warehouse and distribution uses, staff anticipates that approximately 5,500 jobs could be supported on the remaining developable lands in North Coyote Valley. What we found was overall the economic impact to removing North Coyote Valley as an employment growth area is limited because the planned jobs in North Coyote Valley can be realized elsewhere in the city. However, at the same time, staff really wants to stress the importance of protecting industrial employment lands in our urbanized areas of the city to ensure that San Jose is economically balanced, particularly in providing middle wage jobs for San Jose workers. So with that, getting to staff's recommendation for North Coyote Valley, considering the natural and agricultural resources in Coyote Valley and the significant policy shifts that have changed the planning context, really the most significant being Measure T and the purchase and preservation of 937 acres in North Coyote Valley, as well as the current market conditions for industrial uses on the remaining developable lands, staff is proposing 8 recommendations related to North Coyote Valley, including reallocating all 35,000 jobs and removing North Coyote Valley as an employment lands growth area in the general plan. In conjunction, staff recommends to change the land use designations of the properties purchased through Measure T from industrial park to open space, parklands, and habitat, and change the land use designations of properties not already developed with industrial uses from industrial park to agriculture and public quasi-public in the case of Gavilan College's site. Properties would also be rezoned as needed to align with the appropriate general plan land use designations. These proposed land use changes are detailed in attachment G of the task force memo. Additionally, staff recommends exploring a credits program in parallel with the land use changes that would support further conservation actions in Coyote Valley and facilitate development in urbanized areas of the city. Staff is also recommending 3 action items to be added to the general plan, including to move the urban service area boundary north, also to consider an overlay that would limit office buildings as an allowable use in certain industrial park or combined industrial commercial designated areas, or redesignation of some areas to light industrial in order to preserve existing industrial businesses within the urbanized area of the city. And the third being to explore creating an industrial overlay that would allow for new office construction in industrial areas only if the office buildings includes manufacturing or logistics space. So shifting to Mid-Coyote Valley, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Mid-Coyote Valley is designated as an urban reserve in the general plan. It's not planned for urban development through 2040, through the lifetime of the general plan. The allowed uses in the urban reserve currently are primarily agriculture, and the area is again located, it's outside of the city's urban service area and is mostly unincorporated, meaning it is not inside the city's jurisdictional boundary. Most of this land, particularly west of Monterey Highway, is in the county's exclusive agriculture zoning district that Michael mentioned, which is intended to preserve the long-term viability of agricultural uses and limit subdivision of property to 40 acres. Now, as it relates to the South Coyote Valley Greenbelt, this area is outside the city's urban growth boundary and has been designated as a permanent non-urban buffer between San Jose and Morgan Hill for the last 35 years, and is mostly designated for agriculture and open space in the city's general plan. So moving along to our recommendations for Mid and South Coyote Valley, with staff's recommendation to remove the North Coyote Valley employment lands area from the general plan, it leaves a large physical divide or disconnect between Mid-Coyote Valley and the urban extent of San Jose. Staff is also basing our recommendations off of the general plan's goals and policies on rural agriculture and opportunities to better align the city and county's regulations consistent with actions in the Santa Clara Valley Agricultural Plan. Additionally, the city's greenhouse gas reduction goals established in Climate Smart depend on achievement of the general plan's goals to reduce vehicle miles traveled, which is not supported by future urban development in Mid-Coyote Valley. So staff is recommending removing the urban reserve designation from Mid-Coyote Valley and redesignating properties to either agriculture, private recreation, public, quasi-public, or combined industrial commercial. Properties within the city's jurisdictional boundary would also be rezoned as needed to align with appropriate general plan land use designations. To support rural agricultural goals and align the city and county's land use regulations, staff's also recommending to create and apply a new Coyote Valley agriculture overlay that increases the minimum lot size for properties designated agriculture from 20 to 40 acres. The overlay is proposed to be applied to properties that have an existing or proposed agriculture land use designation that are within North, Mid, or South Coyote Valley and are inside the city's jurisdictional boundary. And this is also proposed to be applied to properties within Mid and South Coyote Valley that are outside of the city's jurisdictional boundary, but are zoned exclusive agriculture under the county zoning ordinance, which again sets a minimum lot size of 40 acres. These proposed land use changes, again, are detailed in attachment G of the task force packet. So that concludes staff presentation for agenda item 4. David, if it's okay, I'll move right in, go directly into agenda item 5, which is the redistribution of planned growth, and then we can open it up for public comment, task force discussion. Sounds good. We'll
And,
proceed.
and let me just remind the task force again, these are separate items. We'll have separate discussions and votes on each of these. But it's just, it's not, given the Zoom meeting that we're doing, I think this is going to be the most efficient way to do the staff presentation and afford public comment.
Thank you, David. So several of the 4-year, again, so this item is on planned redistribution of planned growth. And so several of the 4-year review scope of work items involved shifting of planned growth capacity in the general plan. That includes items related to urban village implementation, residential uses in neighborhood business districts, shifting planned housing capacity to downtown, and of course, the previous item related to planned jobs in North Coyote Valley. The task force provided recommendations previously in this process related to urban villages and neighborhood business districts, which included reallocating 600 units to allow housing in 4 neighborhood business districts, moving 1,000 units to the proposed Story Road urban village, and shifting 700 units to the proposed Capital Caltrain Station area urban village. So regarding proposed shifts of housing to downtown, which is one of the scope of work items approved by council. So downtown it's really a key focus area for the city. It's the only specific location that has its own major strategy in the general plan that lays out a vision to continue growth and intensification as both an employment center and an urban residential hub that also brings together cultural activities, dining and entertainment, and really in public life. 2 key planning processes currently underway that are looking to really advance that vision are the Diridon Station Area Plan Amendment and Google's Downtown West proposed mixed-use project. The Downtown West project proposes to increase general plan development capacity in the downtown by 5,575 residential units, and the DSAP amendment process that's evaluated the potential increase in development capacity within the Diridon Station area boundary outside of Downtown West, and determined that up to 7,044 units could be accommodated at maximum build out. So based on the capacity study completed as part of the DSAP amendment process and proposed development as part of the Downtown West mixed use project, staff is proposing to shift approximately 12,600 units from Horizon 2 and 3 urban villages to downtown to support the growth and placemaking vision in the Diridon Station area and the greater downtown. After the proposed housing unit shifts and taking into account projects already entitled in downtown, and assuming that the Downtown West project is also entitled, that would leave over 12,000 units available for entitlement in the downtown. Staff believes this is adequate capacity to accommodate residential growth, both in the Diridon area and east of Highway 87, and to still accommodate growth in our urban villages. It's also possible to make additional capacity shifts in the future if needed to further support development of housing in the downtown. You'll also see on this table that the proposed shifts previously recommended by the task force, as well as a proposal by staff to shift 100 units to the Little Portugal urban village to support future residential growth. I also want to note that staff made some updates to attachment J of your packet prior to the meeting, which is we've also posted online. We realized that some of the Horizon 2 urban village shifts, the proposed Horizon 2 urban village shifts were not reflected on the table, and that has now been updated for you. So moving on to planned jobs capacity shifts. So this table reflects staff's recommendations related to North Coyote Valley, and as mentioned, staff look to align with the 2 major planning processes going on in Diridon to advance the downtown major strategy. The Downtown West project proposes to increase general plan development capacity in the downtown by approximately 21,000 jobs. And then the DSAP amendment, again, it evaluated the potential to increase development capacity in Diridon outside of that downtown west project boundary. And it determined that up to approximately 26,000 jobs could be accommodated at maximum build out, which is reflected in the proposed shifts of jobs in the table on the slide. Staff's also recommending shifting 5,000 jobs to the Alviso master plan growth area, given the anticipated number of jobs in Coyote Valley on the remaining developable lands and the interest in logistics uses north of 237. Also, for those of you on the last 4-year review task force, you may recall we eliminated some jobs from the Alviso growth area in 2016, so this would restore actually most of those jobs. Staff is also recommending shifting jobs to the South Bascom Avenue and Stevens Creek urban villages to respond to recent entitlements and anticipated future demand for development. So the last of staff's recommendations tonight is to create a pool with the residential units planned for former Horizon 3 neighborhood urban villages, which are highlighted there in yellow on the map on the slide. The pool would allow proposed residential and mixed-use residential projects in neighborhood villages to pull from an approximately 2,500 unit planned residential pool across 20 villages. The goal is to facilitate residential entitlements in neighborhood villages by providing flexibility for housing to be built in any of the neighborhood villages, regardless of the balance of remaining capacity in a given village. Since adoption of the general plan, only approximately 130 units have been entitled across those 20 neighborhood villages. So staff feels that the 2,500 units collectively provides adequate capacity for future growth in those villages. And that concludes staff's presentation on the 2 items, and I will pass it back to you, David.
Okay. So they are separate. There's some interrelationship between those 2 items. I'm sure there's many task force members who are eager to ask questions or begin the discussion, but I'm going to ask you to be patient and wait, because what we're going to do at this point is go to public comment. Part of the reason of combining these things, the 2 items, was to give people in the public who wait here patiently the opportunity to comment on both of them without having to wait for one discussion to conclude, which might take a while, to then have the opportunity to comment on the second item. So that's why we're doing it this way. I want the task force again to know that we will have separate discussions on those. We'll take those up separately. And before we turn to the public comment, as it is noted on the web page for our task force, we've gotten quite a bit of correspondence on this issue, correspondence from our own task force members, Megan Fluke, Vince Roca, Margie Matthews, and over 50 letters, including a combination of 114 letters in support of the staff comments. So I just wanted that to be part of the record. So we'll turn now to public comment. And as usual, each member of the public will have 2 minutes to add to the information that's already been submitted to the task force. So who's going to manage that on the staff's part?
That's me, Jessica.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. Would you call the first person, please?
Yes. All right. Well, if anyone's interested in speaking, go ahead and press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. And if you've called in, go ahead and press *9 if you'd like to speak. And so let's get started. So let's see. For the first speaker, we have Charlene Nijme. You may unmute yourself and speak.
Good evening, task force members. My name is Charlene Nijme, chairwoman of the Muwek-Maloney tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area. We strongly support staff's recommendations. Our tribe is comprised of all the known surviving American Indian lineages aboriginal to the San Francisco Bay region. We have been on these lands, lands made sacred by the blood of our ancestors for thousands of years. And today our people still reside in our Aboriginal territories, which we are connected to in a spiritual way. Indigenous people traditionally look 7 generations down the line in making decisions. We understand on such a deep level the importance of nature. For these reasons and more, we support the permanent protection of Coyote Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. The next speaker, Jessica.
The next speaker, we have B. Beekman. You may unmute yourself and speak.
Hi, thank you for the meeting tonight. When you put 2 items together, I understand your efficiency, but you know, people will want to talk on these items. Maybe in the future, if you allow 2 minutes, 30 seconds or 3 minutes to combine both items to allow people to speak, maybe that can be an idea to help as well. About the planning ideas of the last item you just talked about, I wanted to note to yourselves that the MTC is gearing up themselves to consider new ways to talk about VLI, very low income, extremely low income, and mixed income housing ideas, and how that can balance with your urban village plans and your plans for downtown, and just, you know, overall housing, affordable housing plans, how that can balance itself. They want to work at the state level to work on bureaucratic issues at the state level, and how ideas at the local level are really developing and kind of blocking things up, and they want to learn how to facilitate. And that's going to be a big purpose for the MTC, I think, I'm guessing, in the next few months and years. So I thought I'd just give you a heads up on that. So good luck to new practices and what we can do with very low and extremely low and mixed income affordable housing. About the Coyote Valley issues, I work on accountability with technology. There's a great future in that, and you know, open accountable practices with technology and open guidelines do a lot. And there's going to be technology issues in Coyote Valley, and I wanted to make yourselves aware of the good practices and open public policy ideas that can go with that. And the Davis area has developed some really good practices I invite yourselves to look into. And with Measure T funding public oversight ideas, think of technology oversight as well. It's an important purpose. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman. I think, Jessica, who's our next caller? I just see a phone number.
Oh, that's actually Michael, but the next speaker is Dave Poschel. You may unmute yourself to speak.
Good evening. Sierra Club Loma Prieta chapter thanks staff for their scientifically and economically researched and well-planned recommendations, and we urge you to move them forward. So many pieces of the puzzle come together to revitalize our walkable downtown communities, leap forward with our VMT reduction strategies and climate-smart global leadership, and even a Silicon Valley innovation in carbon sequestration techniques. And these general plan updates will restore our connection to nature, our connection to each other, and provide a much needed sense of redemption as we restore the wetlands of Laguna Seca and see return of waterfowl, as we restore oak woodlands and savanna that enhance wildlife habitat, its connectivity, and our opportunity to recreate in them, as we restore the fertility of agricultural lands and introduce fresh and local produce into our schools and hospitals. And as the staff memo also points out, protect the Coyote groundwater subbasin, which accounts for nearly half of all undeveloped recharge areas in the entire Silicon Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Justin Wang.
You may unmute yourself, Justin, and speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, thank you. So my name is Justin Wang with Greenbelt Alliance. Greenbelt Alliance is an environmental nonprofit that encourages the protection of open space as well as directing development and growth into our existing communities to promote climate resilience. First of all, thank you to staff for your tremendous work. This recommendation is nothing less than a historic moment for San Jose and our communities that will benefit from the protection of Coyote Valley. As you may well know, California is the state with the most people currently living in the wildland-urban interface, where, as it so happens, is where wildfire problems are most pronounced. We simply cannot afford to allow more development in the WUI, where people's lives are at greater risk of being lost due to climate-driven wildfire disasters. We know across the region that we desperately need more housing and have advocated accordingly, but it must be climate-smart housing. Building new development in the WUI is putting people in harm's way at a time when we know climate impacts across the Bay Area, like wildfires, are only getting worse. In conjunction with the smoke, heat waves, floods, and other climate challenges that we've seen in the last few years, it has never been clear that these hazards must be planned around. Furthermore, as we've seen, the ecological and cultural value cannot be overstated. Task force members, by voting to adopt the staff recommendations as stated in their memo, you are contributing to a safer, better, more climate-smart Bay Area for generations to come. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Justin. The next speaker is Sibelius Kraus. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Sabella Kraus, president of SAGE Sustainable Agriculture Education. SAGE has led and participated in landmark agriculture and food systems projects in the Coyote Valley and city of San Jose for almost 20 years, in collaboration with the city, county, and numerous other agencies, businesses, and nonprofits. We fully support the staff recommendations for these reasons. Protection of the Coyote Valley's prime ag lands, combined with incentives for regenerative agricultural practices, land access opportunities, and creation of a branded urban edge food belt, will put San Jose in the forefront of innovative climate-smart cities and will make the city a leader in the implementation of the global 30 by 30 initiative, which California recently signed on to. In turn, this vibrant urban edge ag food belt will help support a renaissance of local circular economy-based food businesses, from local food specialty shops in new office centers to food and beverage makers housed in multi-tenant, multi-story incubation centers, to food distribution and manufacturers using incentives to convert to all-electric fleets and operations. And as the farm to family food box shows, when local food assistance is sourced locally, benefits accrue to across the whole food supply chain. And planning for food security goes far beyond emergency preparedness and encompasses long-term resilience. San Jose's food economy has a direct value of around $3 billion annually, and an indirect value multiple times higher, which accounts for contributions to climate resilience, public health, culture, and identity, and also dynamic and creative place. Protecting and investing in the natural, agricultural, and cultural resources of the Coyote Valley is a critical first step. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Ms. Kraus. The next speaker is Ariana H. You can unmute yourself and let us know your last name too, if you could.
Hi, I'm Ariana Haberman, a high school freshman from San Jose and part of the youth contingent of Mothers Out Front Silicon Valley. I'm thrilled with the city staff's recommendations to preserve Coyote Valley. To many, Coyote Valley is a place filled with trails, beautiful trees, and home to much wildlife. But to me and so many youth around San Jose, it is so much more. With the looming danger of climate change threatening to destroy the earth as we know it, open spaces like Coyote Valley are very important to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere so that kids, like myself, can have a future. We need as many open spaces as possible to be preserved if we want to reverse the effects of climate change. In addition, Coyote Valley provides vital flood protection for our area. This is important as extreme weather events like the heavy rains in 2017 that flooded parts of San Jose are now occurring with increasing frequency. Coyote Valley is also extremely crucial because it is the only remaining valley floor connection between the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Diablo Mountain Range. We need to preserve it because it serves as a pathway for so many animals between these two regions. I know I speak for many other kids like me when I say I'm excited for the changes to come as we build wiser, concentrating development in the urban core and preserve vital open spaces like Coyote Valley to protect humans, wildlife, and our fragile climate. Thank you for your service, and thank you for listening.
Ariana, what school do you go to?
I go to Lee High School.
Thanks very much for your comments tonight. We're going to go next to Eli Zegas. Please unmute yourself.
Hey. Good evening, Task Force. My name is Eli Zegas. I'm the Food and Agriculture Policy Director at SPUR, and I'll be brief. We are here, or I am here on behalf of SPUR to wholeheartedly endorse the recommendations of staff that's before you. I agree with one of the previous commenters. This is a historic pivot and change in vision. It's a long time coming, and it'll benefit San Jose for a long time. Also want to give a special recognition and commend the staff of the city coordinating with the staff of the county. That too is a step that many other jurisdictions fail to do. And San Jose, in coordinating cross-jurisdictionally, I think is showing a model of what we need in a lot of other places. So I hope you'll embrace all the recommendations that have been put before you and look forward to seeing the resolution tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jerry DeYoung. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of the Marchese family this evening. I hope that you've all had time to read the February 24th letter from the Marchese family, aka Cherry Orchard Tenancy. They own the largest undeveloped parcel in the South Coyote area. It's about 220 acres adjacent to the relatively new Sobrato High School and its play fields. The Marchese family is in the city, while the vast majority of the land in South Coyote is under the jurisdiction of the county. As the letter suggests, now that large swaths of North Coyote have been acquired by Open Space Agency, there is a new paradigm for the valley that can now be explored. As pointed out in the letter and in the attached parcel analysis, the South Coyote area is fundamentally different from North and Mid-Coyote areas, as the average parcel size is only 6.7 acres. What's more striking is the fact that 61% of the parcels are less than 5 acres in size, and another 21% are between 5 and 10 acres. For context, the area of South Coyote is approximately 2,260 acres. As indicated in the staff, Mid-Coyote, by comparison, is characterized by large lots. This leads us to the conclusion that more analysis should be undertaken by the staff before there are any recommendations regarding land uses in South Coyote. I would point out that over the course of the task force discussions on topics that you have been presented with, many of you raised other policy issues that you wish to pursue. Staff indicated that the work and recommendation had to be guided by the direction of the City Council, and thus you were not permitted to expand these issues. Now, apparently staff has decided it's okay to include its own recommendation on South Coyote, notwithstanding that the council's direction did not include the specific topic. We would therefore ask that you refrain from voting on the staff's recommendation related to lands in South Coyote. This issue needs more thorough and thoughtful analysis before changes could be proposed. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Our next speaker is Rebecca Haberman. Excuse me, Edward Berg. Edward Berg. Mr. Berg, we've got some letters from you. Go ahead and speak, please.
Thank you. I'm Edward Berg, representing the families who own 126 acres in North Coyote Valley. Their land is labeled as remaining developable properties in Attachment C, but staff's recommendation would turn them into undevelopable properties and leave them without any economically beneficial use. We respectfully see these issues with the overview memo and staff's recommendation. First, there's no analysis of the economic impacts to these property owners or the impacts on their property rights. Second, nearly 60% of the city's workforce do not have college degrees. Removing 35,000 middle-income jobs from North Coyote Valley and adding 50,000 paper jobs to downtown high-rises will massively impact job diversity and turn the city's back on those who seek and need these middle-income jobs. Staff could only identify one single 56-acre parcel outside of North Coyote Valley in the entire city as appropriate in size and designation to support new industrial jobs. Third, while interviews with some developers were conducted, No one interviewed the developer who is currently under contract to buy these North Coyote Valley properties for industrial development. Fourth, agricultural use of these properties is not economically viable. Staff's recommended new vision for Coyote Valley is that it should be preserved as a resource for the community. If the community wants to turn these developable properties into a community resource, the community needs to buy them. We urge the task force respectfully to reject staff's recommendation in the name of fairness to middle-income workers and to the property rights of the owners of these properties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berg. The next speaker is Rebecca Haberman. Rebecca, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Haberman. As a leader with Mothers Out Front and a concerned San Jose resident in District 9, I'm very pleased that city staff recommends additional steps to ensure the preservation of Coyote Valley and other open spaces. Our children are depending on us to plan for a livable climate and a city with safe drinking water, flood protection, open spaces, and local agriculture. First and foremost, Coyote Valley is an important carbon sink, which absorbs carbon out of the atmosphere. Second, it's a floodplain that absorbs excess rain, providing vital flood protection for San Jose. Preserving it contributes to a livable future by enhancing both climate mitigation and climate resilience. Also, Coyote Valley is the last intact valley floor connection between the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Diablo Range. It therefore serves as a crucial wildlife corridor for many different animals. In addition, the Coyote Valley open space offers many opportunities for recreational walks, hikes, and runs. My family frequents this area. It is only a 20-minute drive for me to enjoy a walk, soak up the natural beauty, and rejuvenate my spirit, while my daughter runs the hilly 4-mile loop. I'm proud to live in a city with climate-smart goals to reduce per capita vehicle miles traveled and to protect our precious open spaces by focusing jobs and dwellings in urban growth areas. Please vote to approve the recommendations to protect Coyote Valley and other open spaces. Our children are counting on us to preserve these irreplaceable lands so they can enjoy their benefits for years to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Haberman. The next speaker is Tom Foster. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, good evening, task force members. So I'm a property owner. Ed Berg actually is, you just heard from, he represents us. So my grandfather purchased our properties 50 years ago, and with the intention of it as an investment and for development. So we're two of the teal colored properties that are near the intersection of Bailey and Santa Teresa that are labeled remaining developable parcels in your presentation. And there's really 3 points that I just want to make. First is there is no economic beneficial use for agriculture. In 50 years of land ownership, our rents are so low, it doesn't even cover the property tax. And we've absorbed these losses holding these properties as an investment. But now if you were to make them into agriculture, we'd have to absorb that loss permanently. And that's at a time when our properties are already in contract to be purchased based on industrial park uses. Second, this point has also been made by others, but the community really needs job diversity. And the plan to shift blue collar jobs out of North Coyote, it's unrealistic. And that even came out in the staff's own analysis. You wouldn't just be shifting these jobs, you'd be eliminating them and replacing them with white collar jobs, which just aren't the same. And third, my other comment would be that although these goals that you're putting forward are great and lofty for the Valley, not all properties are the same for achieving these goals. Our properties are outside the floodplain, so we're not important to flood control. We're not part of any animal migration paths, and that's per your own study or per the study of the linkage, the Coyote Valley linkage assessment. And we're not a habitat for endangered species, and that's been borne out by other studies. So those are the 3 points I'd like to make for the task force.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. And we also have the letter that was submitted by Mr. Berg as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Neil Sharma. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Is the audio coming through?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Neil Sharma with Post. I'm the Wildlife Linkages Program Manager. I'd like to express appreciation for the staff recommendations for zoning and land use changes in Coyote Valley. Coyote Valley is truly a unique and irreplaceable resource for the wildlife habitat and ecological connectivity it provides between large areas of core habitat and the adjacent mountain ranges. We know that connectivity, including the ability for wildlife to find resources, is essential to promote adaptation to a changing climate and environment, as well as to promote recovery of natural communities following events such as wildfire. As the science on these issues grows, the urgency becomes more and more apparent. This past April, the California Fish and Game Commission decided to consider the mountain lions in our area as candidates for listing under the State Endangered Species Act. This is based on research that found a lack of genetic exchange between neighboring populations being largely attributed to habitat fragmentation at the landscape scale. So this example underscores the importance of conserving Coyote Valley as a last chance and a living linkage to support biodiversity in the valley floor and throughout the region. Much of the ecological value is in the scale, quality, and the diversity of habitat across the landscape. So the specifics of land use throughout the valley floor and the adjacent foothills will have a strong influence on ecological integrity when we consider pressures including direct habitat loss, degradation emanating from noise, light, other pollutants, and vehicular traffic. This is increasingly important to consider as more of the valley is protected and restored. Development under current zoning would contribute to increased habitat fragmentation that would have broad and far-reaching environmental impacts. So the staff recommendations, if adopted, would be a major milestone to recognize and protect the unique values and benefits that Coyote Valley provides. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Our next speaker is Robert Chapman Wood, and we do have several letters from you, Mr. Wood, so certainly you're welcome to use the full 2 minutes, but feel free to bring up points that you haven't already brought up in your letters as well.
Thank you very much. I deeply appreciate the chance to talk. I'm really concerned by the staff's assertion that it's climate smart to overturn the whole of the urban reserve designation in Mid-Coyote Valley before we have a real program and policy and plan to address the housing problem around here. It is in my letter, the fact that Greater San Jose is producing less than 1/4 as much housing as Greater Seattle, and we completely lack a strategy for overcoming the problem. As a result, the failure to provide housing needs around here is driving a huge increase in urban sprawl. All you have to do is drive around the Salinas area or the Los Baños area, and you'll see that the fact that we don't allow people to build in San Jose is pushing people 30, 40 miles out, and they drive 30 or 40 miles every day. As a member of the union at San Jose State, we have faculty members who are doing that, and it's not at all what they want to do. It's entirely possible that the railroad that runs through Coyote Valley might be leveraged to address this with dense new housing on a very small portion of the property of the area there, while fully meeting the other needs that we're talking about. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Andrea McKenzie. Go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
Good evening, members of the task force. I'm Andrea McKenzie, General Manager of the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. Coyote Valley is now a designated landscape of statewide significance and is being recognized across California as a model for nature-based solutions to climate change. The staff recommendations before you are responsive to the city's climate emergency declaration, Climate Smart San Jose, and also align with Governor Newsom's recent executive order to protect 30% of the state's lands and waters by 2030. We are at a historic moment this evening where your actions can set in motion an innovative policy complement to the 2019 landmark acquisition of close to 1,000 acres in North Coyote Valley, and further the collaborative master planning effort for North Coyote Valley that is now getting underway. The authority supports the staff recommendations and urges the task force to approve them. Thanks so much for the opportunity to provide comment this evening.
Thanks, Ms. McKenzie, and thanks for your work on behalf of the Open Space Authority. We're going to go next to Chris Cruz. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment. I'm the department chair of the West Valley College Park Management Program. And for the last 51 years, we've supported open space and parks protection in the Santa Clara Valley. And we clearly support the staff recommendations for the Coyote Valley. It's important that the natural, the cultural, and the agricultural resources that we have in the valley are protected. And it's also going to provide opportunities for employment as well, because there'll be a need for providing protection for these lands, and you'll need employees to do that. And we have students that have been serving in our community for all those 51 years, and we want to continue to do that. Thank you for the opportunity to talk, and we support the staff recommendations.
Thanks very much, Mr. Cruz. Our next speaker is former Mayor Chuck Reed. Hi, Chuck.
Hello, David. Good evening, task force members. Long time no see for many of you. I have submitted a couple of letters to the task force, and I figured out that I don't need to repeat that, as the chair has repeatedly said. So I just have a couple of comments to make. First, the staff recommendation on North Coyote is unfair to the families that now have the opportunity to put jobs on their lands under the existing designations. You heard from Ed Berg. There's a letter he submitted on the constitutional questions. And of course, it not only is unfair, but unconstitutional to deprive these property owners of their property rights unless proper compensation is paid. The third point is that it's not necessary to deprive these people of their property rights. A few hundred acres out of the 7,000 in Coyote could be used for jobs to help fund the vision that you have for a Coyote, an expensive vision, and development on a few hundred acres could go a long ways towards making it possible to do everything else you want to do in Coyote Valley. With that, thank you and good luck to you.
Thank you, Chuck. Our next speaker is Shani, and if you could give us your last name too, go ahead and unmute yourself. Shani? You have to unmute. Yeah, there you go.
Good evening. This is Shani Kleinhaus. I'm the environmental advocate for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. We work to promote the enjoyment, understanding, and protection of birds in our region. And we've been fighting for the preservation of Coyote Valley and its 220 bird species for decades. Staff recommendations are a reason for celebration. They provide protection of the valley with its beauty, its habitat, and its species. They preserve its function in providing nature-based security in the age of climate change. And they looked to explore ways for sustained funding for the valley's future. Staff's outstanding work merits your support. Audubon's decades-long work to protect open space and bird habitat has also extended to Alviso, which is home to a disadvantaged community and many endangered species. We greatly appreciate the letter by former council members Matthews regarding Alviso. We urge you to support staff recommendation with the amendment proposed by former council member Margie Matthews that looks for equity and environmental justice for Alviso and its surrounding and for the protection of Coyote Valley. They don't make open space anymore. Let's take good care of nature. Perhaps she will be gentler with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shani. Our next speaker is Deb K. Deb, could you give us your last name, please?
Yes, good evening. My name is Deb Kramer. I'm the Executive Director of Keep Coyote Creek Beautiful, and I want to thank the staff and task force for their work on Envision San Jose and specifically on Coyote Valley. Immediately after the 2017 Coyote Creek flood, I helped organize neighborhood and park cleanups over the first week after the flood resulting in over 1,400 volunteers helping their community. The Coyote Creek flood highlighted the critical urgency of protecting floodplains and lands that can absorb rainwater like a sponge. A complete solution related to flooding is a mix of green and gray infrastructure. Coyote Valley and other open space areas can absorb water and slow it down to protect communities downstream. Moving jobs away from the valley will help reduce stormwater flows into Coyote Creek in extreme weather events. And this action will protect our groundwater from contamination. If we dare dream bigger, we can even envision the restoration of seasonal wetlands that help regenerate our ecosystems and biodiversity. The staff have shown a way for San Jose to get it right the first time in Coyote Valley and embrace the benefits of a natural floodplain before even building on it. I ask the task force members to support the staff recommendations for jobs to be moved out of Coyote Valley and to protect this land. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Kramer. Next speaker is Linda Ruthruff. Linda, go ahead when you're ready.
Good evening. I'm Linda Ruthruff. I'm the environmental advocate for the Santa Clara Valley chapter of the California Native Plant Society. CNPS is dedicated to celebrating our rich California native plant heritage and preserving it for future generations. We have been working to protect Coyote Valley for decades. The Bay Area is a biodiversity hotspot. We have more species in our area than many other places have in an entire state. But every day we lose more habitat to development and to channelized flood control. And every time we lose habitat, the species that depend on that particular niche move one step closer to permanently disappearing from our landscape. The first of our habitats that were lost, all but lost to development, were the valley floor and most of our freshwater marshes. Protecting Coyote Valley from any further development affords us a unique opportunity to restore this lost habitat. We can protect our species diversity and allow this land and the multiple ecosystem services it provides. We urge you to adopt the staff recommendations. Thank you for affording us this opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Ms. Ruthruff. Next speaker is Stacy Shi. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was correct. Thank you so much. This is Stacy Shi. I'm speaking on behalf of Assemblymember Ash Kalra, who actually supported a joint letter signed by his Assembly Senate colleagues. We're calling for the task force members to support staff recommendations related to Coyote Valley, outlining changes that would be consistent with the state's decision to establish the Coyote Valley Conservation Program through AB 948. And I know it was mentioned earlier, last year, AB 948 was introduced by Assemblymember Kalra, which was signed into law. As many of you know, Assemblymember Kalra has long been fighting for preservation of Coyote Valley since 2007, I believe, before he was even on the San Jose City Council. We all know Coyote Valley is one of the last remaining undeveloped valley floors, and it houses hundreds of species, both endangered, not endangered. We have storage for safe drinking water, irreplaceable wetlands, you name it, a lot of things. And I know one of the main topics that has been brought up time and again today has to do with, jobs, bringing jobs to our city. And in no way are we saying that we don't believe in jobs and jobs are important. But if you think about it, I think it was back in 2016 when Osh was still on city council, Panatoni tried coming in with a warehouse project in Coyote Valley, and it was only bringing a handful of jobs. It really wasn't bringing a substantial amount that would make an economic difference. That aside, you would be bringing trucks day in and day out, and that would add to the wear and tear of the roads, in addition to threatening our wildlife species and their corridors. So we really are grateful for the city of San Jose's bold recommendations and for the task force members for considering the preservation of Coyote Valley. And I really hope that you will align your recommendations with staff recommendations to preserve Coyote Valley for the future. Thank you.
All right, and please share with Assemblyman Kalra our appreciation for his efforts on behalf of Coyote Valley.
Will do, thank you.
Okay, so just to give a heads up to the public members present tonight, I've got 3 more hands And we're going to call on those people shortly. So if you want to participate tonight, please do that and raise your hand shortly. So the next speaker is Tessa Woodmansee.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the public comment. Really, really appreciate that. We need more of that. And so really appreciate a lot of the people that were of the same Umwelt, who have the same values to save our nature. You know, that's the people that are going to help us move into to even potentially have a livable planet. And what my scientist husband was just saying to me is that, you know, the property rights have to be superseded with the greater good for surviving a species as a species ourselves. And right now, he was telling me, my husband, on Cougar W on YouTube is our climate channel, is that he was saying that we have lost 2/3 of all life on Earth since humans have been in civilization. You know, that we have destroyed 2/3. And now we are into the 6th great mass extinction on top. So that's the 1/3 left of all animals that are left since we have destroyed everything. And now 1 million of them are subject for extinction. That's the 6th great mass extinction. And the 5th one, just so you have reference, happened at the dinosaur era. So we are the ones that are changing the planet. And we have to start with what we're doing and how we're doing things. And it's not a matter of slowing down our development, slowing down our progress, slowing down our destroying of nature. We have to have a complete stop and start, you know, bringing nature into our urban lives. That's what has to happen. We have to not only save coyote, we also have to start saving all open land that is in our communities, and having all of our open space that on our properties become food production as we move towards a fossil fuel free future. We have to have urban sustainability, and that needs to be a new ordinance that says any open land needs to be preserved and not be developed. That has to be added to the issue.
All right. Thanks very much, Ms. Woodmansee. Okay, the next speaker, Alice Kaufman. Go ahead and unmute yourself. I see you've done that.
Yeah, hi, thanks very much. Good evening, Chair and Task Force members. This is Alice Kaufman, Legislative Advocacy Director with Green Foothills. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Coyote Valley is one of 2 remaining wildlife corridors in and out of the Santa Cruz Mountains. Without this critical habitat area, species such as mountain lions could be cut off from needed habitat, and their populations could become genetically compromised. Now, the Strategic Economics Report found that the market demand for industrial development in Coyote Valley is primarily for warehouses and distribution centers. This type of use would result in constant heavy truck traffic through Coyote Valley, particularly along Monterey Road, which is already a roadkill hotspot where bobcats, coyotes, badgers, and other animals are hit and killed constantly. The effect of any industrial development in North Coyote Valley would not just be limited to the sites that is proposed on. It would have a devastating effect on Coyote Valley's value as a wildlife corridor entirely. So it's not the same thing as just allowing some of the property to develop. We need to protect all of it. It's not that big concerning how many animals depend on it. There are other places for industrial development in San Jose. There's no other pathway for these animals to use. The fact is that Coyote Valley is far more valuable to San Jose as open space than as warehouses. And open space provides a variety of jobs. In addition to what Chris Cruz with West Valley College spoke about, there are jobs with open space management districts, there are jobs in agriculture. It's not true that the only jobs can come with industrial development. So please vote to protect Coyote Valley. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms. Kaufman. The next speaker is Rajini Srinivasan.
Hi, my name is Ragini Srinivasan, and I'm one of the hub coordinators or leaders of Sunrise Silicon Valley. The Sunrise Movement is a coalition of youth across the nation fighting for climate justice and political action. Based in the Silicon Valley, we work really closely with environmental organizations in our area, as well as the local government. And we strongly urge the task force to adopt the staff recommendations for Coyote Valley. Experts agree that in order to stop climate change, we need to protect our open spaces. This reduces greenhouse gas emissions, not just because we're allowing plants and soil to continue to absorb carbon, but also because building in infill areas means people will drive less. Just right now, we are firsthand seeing the detrimental effects of climate change, with fires raging across California as we speak, droughts draining our water supply and our agriculture industry, hurricanes ravaging the East Coast, the fact that it still gets to 90 degrees Fahrenheit when we're almost in November. And as climate change looms on us day by day, disproportionately affecting our low-income communities and our communities of color, our environment is not something dispensable on which we can compromise. We truly need to do everything that we can in order to stop this crisis. And the environment does not have to be seen as mutually exclusive with the economy. Protecting our open spaces creates new jobs, allowing our economy to flourish. Your choices will determine the future that I and all the other young people in our community will inherit. And for that reason, I strongly ask you to adopt the staff recommendations. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Ken Sasso. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Mr. Sasso.
Asking if they can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, go ahead. All right, good evening, Ken Sasso here. I'm here tonight representing 6 generations of my family who have lived or are living in the Coyote Valley. The first generation coming from Campbell in 1927, that's 93 years ago, to farm. Quite a bit different times than today. I've been in the Coyote Valley myself for 77 years. I have been involved in the history of land use in all the years since our land was annexed to the city of San Jose and zoned since 1959. That's 61 plus years. As stated in the staff's history of land use in Coyote Valley, and they did a very good job under virtual meeting number 9 at attachment B. However, I was involved in many studies from GP 75 until Coyote Valley Specific Plan 2002, yet was not allowed to be on this committee, especially me being a resident and private landowner in the valley. Vacant in the history were the annexations of 1959 Riverside 1B and 1966 Riverside 24. Purpose, as stated in writing for the territory, was to procure municipal services and advantages such as police, fire, street, public works service, municipal zoning, planning, any and all municipal services and facilities which would become available to the territory upon its annexation to the city of San Jose, a written contract between the city and my family. In closing, as a young boy, I asked my grandpa, why did he come to America? His answer was to buy a second pair of shoes to earn them. I'm here to protect that second pair of shoes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sasso. The next speaker and last speaker I have is Norm Mattioni. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Your microphone is still showing as being muted. There you go.
Good evening, David and members of the task force. I've sent to the task force 4 letters on behalf of property owners in the Coyote Valley. Mr. Sasso and his family, Marchese, Felice, and Gunderson. Those 4 properties owners have in common that they're all along the Monterey corridor. And the points I want to make tonight is that as you move from what the task was by the council to address North Coyote Valley and the movement of jobs out of North Coyote Valley, and look at South Coyote and Mid-Coyote Valley, there is a distinct corridor that I think is different than the general Mid-Coyote and South Coyote Valley. And I addressed that in the letter that I wrote on behalf of the Sasso family in delineating, as you move down the roadway, all the uses, industrial, commercial, some farming, RV parks, residences. You have the railroad tracks on the west You have the Coyote Creek that obviously needs to be protected on the far east. And in between, along the corridor, you have these properties that deserve a specific steady and distinction from the rest of the valley. The other final point I would make is you do need to talk to these people who are long-term farmers, and all four are, and have lost the ability that was there in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and into the 60s of farming. Thank you very much for the opportunity to give you my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mattioni. Okay, that's all the hands I see of people who haven't had a chance to speak yet. Okay, so we're going to move to the task force discussion. So what we're going to do is we're going to split this into two parts. First part is going to be recommendations on the future of Coyote Valley, and that's going to deal with the staff recommendations that start on page 17 of the overview memo. And so if you want to speak, go ahead and put your hands up. I am going to recognize, because you wrote letters to the task force as a whole, Megan Fluke and then Margie Matthews, in regard to motions or questions that you may have. I want people to know that what we're going to do in this meeting is we're going to combine the opportunity for discussion and questions all together. Just because of the size of our group, we have a pretty full attendance actually tonight. And to split it like we've done in prior nights, I'm not sure it's the best way to conduct the meeting with this kind of medium. So I want everyone to know that I really want to avoid anybody doing a motion like call the question, or I want everybody to have a chance to ask questions and get clarifications before we vote. So I think that's the best way to balance everything. Let me start with Megan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Pandori, fellow task force members, staff, and members of the public. First and foremost, I would like to offer a land acknowledgement to the ancestors and descendants of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe. They inhabited and stewarded the unceded lands we are discussing tonight for many thousands of years. We have much to learn from Indigenous people, including their deep cultural and spiritual respect they demonstrate for our natural world. There is very little, perhaps nothing, that I can say that hasn't already been said by members of the public, the county staff and board of supervisors, LAFCO staff, state officials, city staff, and our city council. This is a historic moment that took years of work by many hundreds of people. No other city in the state, perhaps the country, has worked to protect lands so close to the urban interface at this scale. And this action is totally aligned with Governor Newsom's recent executive order N8220, as staff said, establishing a goal of conserving 30% of land in coastal waters by 2030. More than $3.5 billion of public and private investment has already been spent to protect nearly 500,000 acres of the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Mount Diablo Range for wildlife and connectivity. And Coyote Valley is a linchpin in this investment. And for the people of San Jose and the greater Santa Clara Valley, action toward protecting the greater Coyote Valley region is a step toward economic sustainability, food security, biodiversity, climate resilience, flood protection, water quality, fire protection, and environmental justice. As you all know, I submitted the motion that I wanted to make tonight to the task force yesterday. I would like to make an amendment to that motion, especially after the presentation from Rob Eastwood and Michael Meehan from the county. With that, I move to have the task force adopt the 10 recommendations as stated in the staff memo under agenda item 4, sent on October 22nd. Additionally,
I would like to move that the city requests the county impose protections in Coyote Valley that match or exceed the city's protections. Thank you.
Second. This is Alvarado.
We usually take seconds from people other than the co-chairs. So is there a second? From
Second.
somebody from-
Harvey.
All right.
Second.
Okay.
Second.
Thanks.
Second.
Okay. Lots of seconds.
David, I've had my hand raised before
Yeah, I'm
this
gonna.
motion.
Yeah. We have a motion on the floor. So Sean, you're next up. Sean Milligan.
Thank you, David. I'm supportive of preserving Coyote Valley for the future, but I'm not interested in doing that at the expense of private property rights. Our Constitution was built to protect individual liberties, and private property rights are the foundation of that Constitution. So unless staff can find a way to protect the rights of people that are represented by Norm Mattioni and Mr. Berg, I'm not interested in supporting this motion this evening.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. The next person I've got is Harvey Darnell. Go ahead, Harvey.
Hi, it's Harvey Darnell. I am very supportive of this motion, but I also am concerned about the property rights of the individuals who own property in the area, and they may come back and go to court and throw all this into a great turmoil. So I want to know what staff is doing in terms of how we can somehow compensate the current property owners. Are we looking at the current value of the land with the overlays that industrial overlays that will be reduced to the value under agriculture, and somehow to reimburse them for the loss of that value to possibly mitigate and prevent them from needing to go to court to stop this?
Jared, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. Yeah, I just reminded the task force. Yeah, one of the fifth recommendation on Coyote Valley related to North Coyote, staff is recommending to explore a credits program in parallel with those proposed land use changes to support not only the further conservation actions in Coyote Valley, but then also facilitate development in urbanized areas of San Jose. So that could be a potential tool for property owners currently in Coyote Valley.
So I fully support this, and I hope that that it's fully developed and can keep us out of the courts so that we can actually move forward and get this land turned into open space. Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey. Next up is Roberta Moore.
Thank you, David. So I agree with everything that everyone said, except for there was one thing one person said I didn't agree with, and that is that we have to put the environment over property rights. We have to have economic compensation that would need to be added for me to vote for this, and it cannot just be a credits program. Number two, we really need, I thought N. Mattioni's comments were really important. There's some areas that are still ideal for development, and we do need space for development. I think those need to be identified and separated out. And three, I think it's crucial we identify the areas that are needed for the wildlife corridor, for the land, the water table and things like that. I thought Tom Foster's comments were really important and should not be ignored. So if there's not additions to this, I will be voting no.
Thanks, Roberta. Okay, thanks, Roberta. Next is Bob Levy. Bob, yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm very excited about this proposal. This is really something we've been working on for at least a decade. I think staff did an outstanding job of justifying the proposal from a public, government, a community, a habitat, a water, a climate perspective. I think they did a very thorough job. I'd like to highlight the importance of the Coyote Valley for protecting the city from climate change. We have a very valuable aquifer there that needs to be protected. And as climate change goes on, we're going to be running into droughts and hotter weather, and that aquifer is going to be critical. We also need to make sure we protect that wildlife corridor. As habitats change from climate change, animals are going to need to migrate between the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Diablo Range. And we're also going to see a lot more fires that are going to force their migration. So from an environmental perspective and from a water perspective, this property is critical. I've been fully in agreement with staff's recommendations on the North and Central Coyote. I have some questions concerning the South Coyote though. I'm wondering, really what's our jurisdictional preview is there? What are we really allowed to do with the South Coyote? And also the South Coyote is pretty well developed to a large extent. They're very small parcels. And I'm wondering if the South Coyote can be used actually for development credits to allow development elsewhere, or to develop the South Coyote and protect more critical habitats elsewhere. So I'm, very happy about the proposal for the most part, but I'd like a little more detail on the South Coyote.
Jared?
Yeah, so most of South Coyote Valley is outside of the city's jurisdiction. So it's within the county. In terms of the designations, most of South Coyote is really is designated agriculture or for open space or open hillside. And so staff's not proposing any land use changes there. We are proposing, of course, the application of the overlay on certain properties in South Coyote Valley. But we're not proposing any land use changes. And again, most of the area is outside of the city's jurisdiction.
Yes, exactly. So that's why I'm sort of curious as to why we're even taking it up.
Well, it's part of the general plan. If I could just intervene, it's part of the general plan. It's always been part of the general plan in our sphere of influence, and it's always been non-urban planning for that area of the city. That's one thing that's been at least somewhat consistent over the decades, despite all the different general plan changes that have occurred elsewhere. Is that correct?
Right, and one of the things we're looking to do here is align the city's and the county's land use regulations with our recommendation.
Do you have any follow-up questions on that, Bob?
No, my only other questions are associated with the distribution of the jobs and the housing. And we'll take care of that during the next portion.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Bonnie Mace. Bonnie, you're up next. Go ahead and turn your mic on. Yeah.
Thanks. So while I'm completely supportive of the preservation of Coyote Valley, I too have concerns about property rights, lawsuits, and compensation. So I have 3 questions for staff. And the first is, how many property owners are affected? We've heard from some, but I'm sure not all. So how many property owners are affected? Has staff talked to them at all prior to this? And how many have contracts for development? Because from what I understand, one of the property owners said that their property was under contract for potential development. So how would that affect lawsuits, et cetera? So those are my 3 questions. Thank you.
In terms of the number of property owners, we would have to follow up on the exact number. We can get that information as a follow-up item. We have had discussions with some of the property owners in the area, and in terms of potential litigation, it's our staff's understanding that the proposed change, land use change, that agriculture would not result in a takings.
Yeah, it would. It would. There'd still be an economic. Hang on one second. Sorry, I have 2 devices on. Yeah, so we've talked to our attorneys about this, and it's not a takings because there's still an economically viable use of land. It could still be used for agricultural uses. While it may not be the highest and best use of the land, there are still things that the property could be used for. And I think the other is regarding public outreach. So after conclusion of the task force process, we will have community outreach and meetings for all of the task force recommendations. So we'll be doing outreach as part of that process before we go to planning commission and council with the recommendations of staff and the task force.
Thank you.
If I could follow up with one of Bonnie's questions, the issue of contracts for development, that's a matter between a property owner and a developer. The development still has to conform to the city's plans, and the plans currently for North Coyote are very restrictive in terms of campus industrial development, with minimum acre sizes of so much, and I think it was like 50 acres, an average lot size of 100 acres. There's nothing pending before the city right now that conforms to that, is there, Jared?
I'm sorry, can you ask that question again, David?
There's no pending development project that conforms to the campus industrial designation in North Coyote, correct?
Correct. There's nothing on file at this time for industrial park uses.
And there's nothing on file, of course, for the urban reserve, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Bonnie, do you have any other questions? Bonnie?
No.
Okay, thank you. I've got Pat Cicedo next, and I guess I want everybody to know that, Pat, tell me if I'm remembering things right. You were on the Economic Development Task Force that was appointed when there was the initial planning for Coyote Valley, weren't you?
Yeah, that was a couple of years ago, but yes. We all know, right?
Yeah.
Well, that and I think some of the comments that have been made this evening and even by staff, it's very correct. I mean, the land use, the whole issue of employment lands. I mean, that has been seen, North Coyote, for many years as an economic opportunity for the city, and that has been part of the plan for quite some period of time. There's no question about that. As we look at today and the future and where we're going for tomorrow on the acreage there. So my questions, I did have a question, and I know staff had talked about creating the credits program. I guess my question, because we clearly have heard from several property owners, remaining property owners, aside from the already developed and then the Measure T purchased lands that are now down in the North Coyote and Climate Lands area. But on the credit program, is the idea you're going to have this program put together very clear? The property owners will understand exactly, as well as council, when you bring the recommendations to council for adoption for the task force work that we've done, and what is the timeline for this credits program to be fleshed out?
Yeah, so with the credits program, we would seek direction from the council on whether we'd further explore that program in terms of the timing. So when we bring the 4-year review task force recommendations, we would seek direction from council on whether to continue to explore this concept further.
So, okay, that causes me some concern, because also what I've heard in response to Bonnie's question is there has not been an effort to literally to bring the property owners in and sit down and have a conversation with them about what the city wants to do in changing the designation on their properties. And I think that's unfortunate, because we talk in San Jose all the time about transparency and outreach. And these folks, some of them we've heard this evening, I know Ken Sasso, I've sat on a number of task groups myself with Ken. They've been around. I mean, they're not unknown to San Jose. So I think it's really disappointing that there wasn't more effort to bring them in, go through all of this, make them fully aware of the plan, the timelines, and get feedback from them. I think that's unfortunate. I also wanted to ask, I know on Mr. Berg's letter, he indicated his understanding was that to completely change the land use in North Coyote would require an environmental review. And I'd like for the city to respond to that. Is that your understanding, or is Mr. Berg incorrect?
Yeah, as part of our recommendation and part of all our recommendations for the FOIA review, we would be conducting a CEQA analysis. So we would look at, well, what are the impacts of changing the land use designations from industrial park to agriculture, and what those impacts would be on the city.
So
on the environment, that is.
Right. So explain the conflict, though, when council gave direction to not engage in anything by a task force that would require CEQA review. I'm confused. How do we plan to get around that?
I know in the last FOIA review, we did receive direction on not that our work shouldn't result in an environmental impact report. I don't believe we received that same direction this time, but we also, we don't anticipate the changes that we propose to result in the need for an EIR. We would need CEQA, certainly, but we wouldn't, anticipate an EIR. And a little more information about the credits program too. I think, staff will, we hope to bring more information about that potential credits program to the best of our ability to council when we get there, for them to be able to make a informed decision whether we can, it's something that we want to continue to work on. I did want to mention that.
Okay, I appreciate that. I did want to make also a comment just for myself. The recommendations regarding the urban reserve, I still am struggling with that one a little bit. I have a real concern about removing that option of the urban reserve for the city of San Jose. We really don't know what life is going to be like 10 and 15 years from now. I certainly understand the enthusiasm and the desire and the rationales as far as more ag and so forth for the Mid-Coyote. But I also have a concern that wiping this area out for any kind of economic opportunity other than ag, open space, etc. I'm still struggling with that this evening, and I will be until we finally vote. But I did want to lay that out, and it does cause me some concern long term. In fact, I wanted to ask staff, how many acres of urban reserve will the city of San Jose have if the converting of land use for the urban reserve in Coyote happens? How many acres then do we have as a city in urban reserve for the city of San Jose?
We can look that up right now. And so basically, what would be remaining would be the Almaden Valley Urban Reserve. I don't have the acreage on the top of my head, but we can probably look that up right now, and we'll get an answer on that.
That's it.
But yeah, those are the two urban reserves, as you mentioned, Pat.
Yeah, so really we will be looking at all future economic in the existing urban service area, urban growth boundary, which the other action will be to pursue moving the urban growth boundary. And so I will make one overriding comment. Less land will more typically resemble our peninsula cities of Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Mountain View, Sunnyvale. Land will get more expensive, which could ultimately mean housing could get more expensive. That's not to negate the good things that could happen by these changes. But I think we need to be honest, and we need to acknowledge we will likely drive the cost of housing up even further by the potential actions of our recommendation, but the council taking this action down the road when they make their decisions on these recommendations. So thank you, staff. I appreciate your answering my questions. And that's all, David.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Thanks very much. You've been a long-time advocate for economic development in the city, and nothing new at all what you've said tonight. The next speaker is Margie Matthews.
Yes, thank you. I'm very supportive of the recommendations with one small exception, but they represent just decades and decades of work by lots of environmental groups to save Coyote Valley. So I want to thank them and acknowledge their hard work. And I do support with one small exception, but it's a significant one especially for the people involved. And I must speak out on behalf of the town of Alviso. While the staff has written out a very thorough history of Coyote Valley, there's another history that goes even farther back with the city, and that's the one with Alviso, because for years Alviso has been neglected. It's a very fragile environment. It's been a dumping ground for landfills and sewage treatment plant. It's prone to flooding. And many years ago, we got together and put together an Alviso master plan to turn that around, to protect the historic nature of Alviso and to start paying attention to its fragile environmental situation. So I would ask the maker of the motion to make a small amendment, and that is to, rather than to reallocate 5,000 jobs to Alviso, just a slight wording change to evaluate in conjunction with the Alviso community the possibility of reallocating. It might be just fine, but I do not feel comfortable just reallocating jobs to Alviso without a deeper look and without including the people of Alviso. So I would ask the maker of the motion to change that wording a little bit. And for these reasons, the area is prone to very dangerous flooding, not only for the town of Alviso, but for the city of San Jose, particularly the downtown, and it's only going to get worse with climate change. It's a treasure of open space now. We finally acknowledge we have a marina, there's a wildlife preserve, there are trails around the bay and trails for the creeks that go in there. And it has unique historic resources that haven't really been rediscovered yet or paid any attention to. So, you know, for all these reasons, Alviso is really still remains a hidden gem. Its proximity to the rest of the urban area means that it could really be an asset for everyone in terms of open space, recreation, and historic resources. So I really think as it makes its way to the council, I'm not asking to delay the process, but as it works its way to the city council, that a deeper look be taken at relocating these jobs, 5,000 jobs to Alviso, and that there be some community input into that, because again, they have a long history of being ignored and shunted aside, and I don't want this to be another bad chapter.
So Margie, for clarification, you did send a letter to the task force, and you put in the precise language that you're looking for, and that would be your request to Megan to amend the motion for that particular language?
Yes, and it's the second reallocate. It's not the first word in recommendation 1 is reallocate all 35,000 jobs. I'm fine with that. It's the second reallocate where it says specifically reallocate 5,000 jobs to Alviso. I'd like to change that to evaluate in conjunction with the Alviso community the possibility of reallocating 5,000 jobs to Alviso.
Okay, that's clear what you're asking.
Yes.
Megan?
David, there needs to be a clarification on this issue. Jared, would you like to do it?
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, and Margie, yeah, definitely appreciate the comments. And just that, want to clarify that the shift in jobs, the 5,000 jobs wouldn't result in any changes to the Alviso master plan. So, you know, any development moving forward would still need to be consistent with that plan. So the land use regulations that are in place at this time would not change. So we just wanted to provide that clarification for the task force.
And to elaborate that on more, there's an area along 237, primarily east of the Alviso village and south, that is currently has industrial and combined industrial commercial land use designations on it. And we're not proposing to expand or change those land use designations in any way.
It would just be a higher density of jobs in the same.
Yeah, it would just be more theoretical jobs capacity that could be applied consistent with the Visa master plan on the existing lands that are planned for jobs.
Okay, well, still, I think it's important for the city's relationship with people who live in Alviso to have the opportunity to have that explained to them and get their input before it goes to the city council.
All right, that's understood. I'll go to the maker of the motion. Megan?
I will accept that friendly amendment.
Thank you.
And the many people who seconded it. Is there anybody in opposition? I think we need an official second. Who wants to be the official second on this one? Did staff get that second? Jared or Jessica or Keelan? Okay.
I think was it Bob? I think Bob Levy, Keelan or Jessica. Let me know if you got something different. You had something different on that.
I'll take the honor, and I'll accept it.
All right. Recognizing there were other people who seconded it as well, but thank you, Bob, just because we have to have a clear record here. Okay, let's keep going. We do have a lot of other comments still. Smita Patel. Smita?
Hey, thank you. It's great to see everyone. I want to thank staff for just their extraordinary work on this. The memo, the thinking, the vision, all of this has just been incredibly impressive. I want to add, people have already said it so articulately, all the many reasons why Coyote Valley is so important. Just wanted to add that it's important for our mental health. This year has shown us anything, the need to have open space to be able to get away from it all. The need to have greenery and open space for our children. There's a recent study that came out that showed its connection with higher IQs in children. I think it's just so important that we not lose touch with that sense of identity and place and the ancestors who lived here, the farms where our food comes from. So in addition to all the other important roles that Coyote Valley plays for our valley, I think that has to be considered. In fact, I was remembering that when I was growing up in San Jose, people always referred to San Jose or to San Francisco as the city. And it was like, what about us? Are we chopped liver here? I love San Jose, and I think Coyote Valley has the opportunity to make San Jose really stand out in California. And so I just, again, want to thank everybody who has done so much to bring this vision to fruition of not thinking small and in the box, but really thinking for the future. I have a few questions. So one of them is, I don't know if Michael Meehan might be able to answer this, but I remember seeing in some of the letters that agriculture was not really feasible or viable in Coyote Valley. And I thought I saw something in Mr. Meehan's presentation that said that it actually was, and there was just some issue with availability of land. I was wondering if that could be clarified or expanded on a little.
Sure, I'm happy to respond. Our studies and our outreach to farmers and ranchers in our county, as well as the greater Bay Area region, pretty conclusively found that the number one barrier to a successful farming operation was access to land, and that there is an abundance, particularly of new and emerging farmers, immigrant farmers to this region, and that they have training, they have experience, they have access to capital, they have access to support groups, they have access to markets. We have the right climate, we have a healthy aquifer, we've got a number of technical advisories through UC Cooperative Extension, the RCDs, et cetera, and that truly the chief barrier has been their ability to access land and to afford land, which in large part has a high cost due to the speculative value as a result of the prospect for development. And so while every farming operation is different, I would assert that because certain types of operations are not successful in a given area or during a given time period, that agriculture in the entire Bay Area is thriving, and many farmers would love to farm in Coyote Valley.
Okay, that's useful to know. Thank you. I have one more quick question, please. And I will plead ignorance here. I'm concerned too about people's property rights and takings, but I'm not clear on land use versus zoning. And I thought I read somewhere that this land was already agricultural, zoned for agriculture. Is that something you could clarify for me? I'm a little unclear. The privately held land that was being talked about.
Right. Yeah. Good question. So that the general plan, the general plan land use designation determines the type of uses that are allowed on a given property, and then the zoning implements that. The zoning is going to, the general plan kind of provides the broad category of uses. So let's take a property in North Coyote Valley that's designated industrial park. It dictates those types of uses. And then the zoning will set development standards, the type of permit that's necessary, whether it's a site development permit or a conditional use permit. And set those standards. So while there are properties in Coyote Valley where you have the general plan land use designation and the zoning do not match. So if development were to move forward, those properties would need to be rezoned to a zoning district that we would say is conforming to the general plan for that development to move forward.
So they're currently zoned agricultural, or there's?
It varies, but yeah, many of them are zoned agriculture, and under under state law, we would need to rezone those properties. If we're changing the land use designation, we need to rezone those properties to be consistent with the general plan.
Yeah, it's actually very, very complicated. So there are, as Jared described, there's also, just keep in mind that all of Coyote is in San Jose's sphere of influence, as David Pandori just mentioned. And so our general plan determines how you can use that land if you want to redevelop or change the use. And there's underlying zoning, and sometimes that zoning is in the city's city limits, and that zoning is consistent with the general plan. Sometimes it's not. There's also lands that are in the county technically, but are covered by our general plan. And the city's general plan and the county zoning districts are often aligned, but not perfectly aligned, and we're trying to align those. There are properties in Coyote Valley, thanks to city manager Dutch Hammond, who Ken Sasso actually, I think, indirectly talked about, who back in the days when San Jose was vision was to become the Los Angeles of Northern California, and expanded widely, which is why San Jose extends all the way to Morgan Hill. There are properties that were annexed under Dutch Hammond's leadership in the 50s and 60s that are zoned for single family homes, but have an agricultural land use designation on top of them. So it's it's pretty complex, and there's many different layers and many different situations throughout the valley.
We can talk about this for quite a while, but we're going to have to move along. Any follow-up questions, Smita?
No, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Let me see, Michelle Yesney. Now, I would think you would have some perspective to offer us. Michelle?
Very funny. Yes. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Yes, my history with Coyote Valley probably goes back as far as Pat Sado's, and that I was the lead staff working on the first land use plan for Coyote Valley. At a later date, I was the Greenbelt Alliance Board of Directors when we were objecting to the city's plans for Coyote Valley. It's been an interesting evolutionary time. And throughout that time period, the issues of a large piece of open space, the very tricky environment that needed to be developed to meet the city's economic goals has always been a hard knot. And I read the staff report, I think with a certain amount of relief in that we seem to be untangling the knot. There was I think a member of the public suggested developing housing in Coyote Valley would be the solution to sprawl in Linus and Los Banos. What it would do, of course, is move the sprawl to San Jose. I'm also concerned about the suggestion that we should keep little enclaves of development as we build this open space around it so that we can put in some high density housing maybe, or a few jobs, which is almost classic for all, and ignores the fact that if you put urban development in Coyote Valley, you've got to bring in urban utilities and services, even if it doesn't take up very many acres, because you have to have the services land use. This staff's proposal to me appears to be a good, long-term, consistent, inherently valuable proposal for Coyote Valley that gives something that San Jose can look at with pride for the next 50 years and not have to be ashamed that we trashed a large part of open space remaining to us. I'm less worried about how the issues property rights should be considered at this point. This isn't the first time this kind of issue has come up, and there are legal processes available to both the landowners and the city. In just dealing with the issue of land use alone, I think that the staff's proposal is a good one. I'm confident that the CEQA review will be done adequately, however this unfolds. And I would support Margie's suggested addition. I'm glad the maker of the motion included it, because I also agree that Alviso is an equally fragile community that the city has responsibilities for. Having watched this evolution over time, having been involved in land use in the city of San Jose for the last, oh God, 40 years, can't be right. I am nevertheless very happy to support this. Yeah, Dave, you've been around almost as long.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite, but anyway. So I thank staff for what they have put on the table. I acknowledge the concerns the property owners have, because this is another set of changes for Coyote Valley. But I think for the city, this is a good set of changes. And thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Michelle. Michael Van Avery. Michael?
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I will not be supporting the motion for the reasons mentioned for the property ownership rights. Additionally, I find it disturbing that when we started this general plan 10 years ago, in which I was a member, many different triggers, many different dollars, planning, many different infrastructure dollars has been spent in an attempt to bolster this area as an industrial part of San Jose, given the fact that these jobs were, at the time supposedly so important for this. I question whether or not the jobs, I do not also, I think Alviso should actually have more jobs as staff is recommending. If in fact this motion were to pass, it is going to place a lot of burden on other parts of San Jose, which will be of course studied in the overall EIR. But this is an incredible waste of resource over the last 20, 25 years. And it just compounds it for these property owners who watch the Bailey interchange be fast-tracked by Governor Davis with state funds put in to actually have campus life in this area. And now in the world of COVID, when we're looking at our industrial areas and how companies will expand in the future, we're going to limit our ability for economic development, frankly, with a lot of emotion. I recognize there's a ton of science that goes with open space, but we have thousands of acres protected with open space in the Mid-Coyote area. Again, we're a tremendous amount of planning dollars and resources at the expense of property owners were spent and essentially denied. And again, so I support, I do not support this motion. I support the property owner rights, but I can't in good faith support something that where infrastructure has been placed with millions of dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Juan Estrada? Juan?
Yeah, I'm turning on.
Yeah, thank
But
you.
I have a question that I want to clear up, and then I'll voice my opinion. So I hear the concerns about property rights, and my assumption, and as you know, I haven't been involved in this type of work too long, is my assumption is that this wouldn't be the first time that the city has changed the land use designation. It wouldn't be the first time that properties have been impacted. Is that the case?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. It almost seemed like this might be the very first time, and that this would set some kind of precedent, and that this would not be anticipated even decades ago, but it sounds like it does happen. So I do hear the concern about the urban reserve and housing. I'm not sure I understand it, given that the need for housing is being accommodated, right, in the motion and in the staff recommendation. I heard a concern about what life will be like in 10 to 15 years from now. I appreciate staff's vision because I'm picturing that 100 years from now, my descendants and yours will be hiking trails and enjoying nature just down the road. And so when I think about the owners of those properties, it seems like it would be a wonderful legacy for their ancestors, their grandparents, whenever the land was purchased, to be able to provide that for the future. I don't see this as just preserving open space, but preserving our future, providing for future generations, just looking even hundreds of years down the road. And so for those reasons, I fully support the motion. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Juan. Shiloh, Ballard?
Yeah, I'll chime in here and just say, for me, this issue is really black and white. We have incredible climate change issues. And we're talking about, I mean, the way this is being couched is kind of pitting the environment against economic development and jobs. And that's just a false premise. We can do both. And in fact, it is just much more important to be elevating the rights of the earth over individual property rights. I wanted to add that, you know, while I respect that people make investments in purchasing property, and that we should do our best to, you know, find policy solutions that don't pull the rug out from folks who make investments under certain rules. I also strongly believe that when you purchase property, when you buy stock, when you invest in something, you are doing so because you know you are gambling to some extent. So I just don't believe in this notion that if someone buys property, then we should protect those rights in that particular moment forever. It's still a gamble. So, and the last thing I wanted to say was, you know, in addition to strongly supporting this motion and strongly supporting our ability to protect Coyote Valley, is to ask Megan, who I consider one of the folks on this task force, along with a lot of other folks, to have been leading this and have been paying attention to it and being very intentional and thoughtful about what we should be doing here. That is this strong enough? Are we doing enough to protect Coyote Valley for as long as we can? Because we know, we've seen the political winds shift, right? It was not very long ago that we were about to open up Coyote Valley, and we built a freaking intersection to nowhere there now, right? But is this enough to keep this protected for as long as we can?
Is that a question to staff, or
That was a question to Megan. That was a question.
Well, what I'd like to do is, we're not here for interchange discussion between people. You're welcome to make your own comments. I don't want to if you have a question for staff, go ahead and do that. But I don't want to start reopening it up to people who've already spoken. If you could, just trying to balance things here, Shiloh, with a 40-person task force. So,
Megan, you can just like do the thumbs down icon.
okay. Thanks, Shiloh. Thanks for understanding. All right.
Steph could respond to one thing that Charlotte.
No, dude, let's keep going here. Jim Zito, you're next.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate staff's work on this. When I was on the Planning Commission, I'd always been one who supported green space and open space, but I'm also very concerned about property rights. The one thing that had come out that was very interesting to me is the preservation of ag land. And I do believe that agriculture close to urban areas and transportation impacts on the environment, if you can do it. Obviously we don't want something like Coalinga, because I believe that actually hurts the environment way more than it helps the environment with the impact of natural gases, if you will, into the environment and so on. But I am concerned about the 700-pound elephant or gorilla in the room, and that is we've got a couple of propositions, and I'm wondering that are on the ballot, and I'm wondering if staff included propositions would have on the use of ag land, or at least people leasing their property for ag purposes, if in fact those passed. And maybe they have no impact at all. And maybe I'm unduly concerned. But what I'm concerned about is that this vision of allowing the land to be used for ag, there's a lot of people who have inherited the land and they're not farmers, so they've been leasing the land out. Does Props 15 and/or 19 impact that and actually put a disincentive for that to happen? And has that been considered in staff's consideration?
Props 15 and 19, any comment on that?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any impact that the current propositions on the state ballot would have on our recommendations tonight.
Yeah, we haven't looked into that.
Because my understanding is if it's not owned, if it's not occupied with 19, if it's not by the people who inherited the land, that it gets reassessed and you get an uptick of your property taxes, probably pretty considerable considering it's been in the families for a long time. And also, if you're not the person if it's not a family farm and you're leasing the property to allow others to farm your land, then that's a business. And once again, the property gets reassessed at business property rates. And my concern is that I really do appreciate that how can I say, possibility. I'm really pro ag close to urban areas. But if we're gonna not be able to do that because existing laws may prevent that and make it completely infeasible, then it's not a solution.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Let's go next to Linda Lazat. Linda, you've got perspective on this both as a council member in the Open Space Authority or the Water District.
And a planning commissioner. So
There you go.
I've been at this for as long as you and Pat and Margie and some of the others and Michelle. So just so much to say, but so much has been said by a lot of my colleagues here on this august committee. So I just want to say ditto to all the comments by my friends in the environmental community, Megan Fluke, Alice Kaufman, Shani Clayhouse, Andrea McKenzie, and Dave Pichelle. And to you, Margie, for bringing up Alviso. I absolutely agree with you. I had the same question. If you hadn't asked it, I would have. Otherwise, Dick Santos would have killed me. But I'd also be remiss as a director at the Water District if I didn't mention the importance of flood protection and groundwater preservation that this historic recommendation and motion and the purchase of land by the city, by OSA, by Post, brings to bear on the mission that I care about at the Water District, which is, providing a water security, flood protection, and environmental stewardship to this county, and all the hard work that we've all done for Coyote Valley. So I'm going to wholeheartedly support the motion, particularly with the amendments made by Margie concerning Alviso. So thank you, Megan and Bob, for accepting that.
All right, thank you, Linda. Andre Lutard.
Thanks, Chair Pendori, and I'd like to thank staff for all their work that they've done in, and I appreciate all the comments that the public and the other members of the task force have presented so far. I fully support the staff recommendations on Coyote Valley in terms of all the environmental benefits, the agricultural and climate resiliency objectives. The term historic has been used several times this evening, and so apparently as a task force member representing the historic preservation community, I have to issue a strong caution, specifically regarding the reallocation of the jobs and employment, jobs and residential capacity into downtown and to Alviso. Many folks don't realize that San Jose was founded in 1777. And our downtown includes and is surrounded by many historic neighborhoods that feature many architectural and historically significant buildings, and some of them we don't even know about because there haven't been proper surveys to assess our historic resources. And if you think about the downtowns that people flock to, like the Gaslamp District of San Diego or Chicago or even San Francisco, shocker, right? They're areas that have historically significant and architecturally significant buildings in them. And yet we are quickly wiping out the very historic buildings and homes that make a desirable downtown and places that workers and residents want to be in. So again, it's a caution. So the very reason why our downtown can become an attractive, vibrant, eclectic place with a variety of historic architecture from all eras of its evolution, we are losing that very quickly. So the jobs and housing redistribution proposal does not address and indeed perpetuates the legacy sprawl that continues to contribute to higher vehicle miles traveled and low density housing in far-flung suburbs of San Jose. So I just wanted to issue that caution to those who are listening. Thanks.
Thanks, Andre. Carl Lee, you're up.
Thank you. One of the things I love about San Jose is the diversity we have in our community. And I think our land use and the way we approach land use reflects some of that diversity. We have the urban centers, we have the open space. That said, I do have concerns, like some of the other task force members, in terms of the impact on the current property owners. It seems to me that they've encountered some financial hardships recently with the current use. And with this proposal, we're basically changing the playing field to the detriment of the values of that property. And I'm not seeing that the credit idea, or maybe I just don't have enough details, that actually will do much to rectify that situation. The other concern that I have is in the original 2040 general plan, part of the strategy was to try to reverse the commute as one of the factors in terms of climate. And with this proposal, we would be completely removing that opportunity. And my last comment would be in terms of the allocation of the jobs to downtown. I think with COVID and the impact, and we're just seeing the initial stages, and I'm sure the pendulum will swing back the other way. But right now, that urban center doesn't really support the trends that we're seeing from a commercial standpoint, office space standpoint, and also from housing. And this is more about the jobs. But it looks like most of the transition is with jobs and housing migrating out of urban centers. So anyway, because of those reasons, I don't think I can support the current motion.
Thank you, Carl. Susan Butler Graham. Susan?
Hi. I also want to thank staff and the many, many people that have been working on this for decades. As a mother and grandmother, I worry about my kids' future. And as a member of Mothers Out Front, I'm working with mothers and others across the country for a livable climate for all children, especially now when the effects of climate change have become more frightening and immediate. The preservation of these open lands and agriculture in Coyote Valley is crucial to the future of our kids. As we see in the presentation, 1 acre of farmland in Santa Clara Valley produces 77 times fewer greenhouse gases than 1 acre of developed land. This undeveloped land serves as a carbon sink, and we can improve the farmland practices to sequester more carbon from the atmosphere for better climate resilience, in addition to all the other reasons that Coyote Valley is important. I'm so proud to live in a city that recognizes the climate emergency and the value of these lands, and to be part of this historic vote to preserve open space and agriculture in Coyote Valley. I enthusiastically support the staff recommendations.
Thank you, Susan. Jason, Sue, Jason?
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Just going to start off, I support the staff's recommendation. I appreciate your work as well as everyone that's been doing this work for many, many years. And I support the current motion on the floor by Megan Fluke. Just quickly, I do want to thank Smita for mentioning mental health. These types of benefits of open spaces are difficult to articulate, but they are made more apparent when we have less safe ways to relieve stress during this pandemic. And I also want to thank Shiloh for her perspective on property ownership. Considering the needs, we need to consider decisions in one area leading to impacts somewhere else. And I think about that because I often wonder what land use decisions led to the need for a major flood control project that led to the Guadalupe River Park that we have right now. And do we need it in the future for Coyote Creek? I do have a quick redesignation question that is inspired by what Juan Estrada asked, because it's making me think about other designation changes we as a task force have recommended. So this is a question to staff. When a city redesignates land uses that change potential development options, is there usually just compensation considerations for lost opportunity?
I'm sorry, Jared, do you want to take, or so are there compensation when there's a loss of value because it's going from a more lucrative land use to a less lucrative?
Yeah, and not just in this context, but in every.
Not. No. I mean, that's not done as part of that land use decision.
Okay, I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple people who still haven't spoken. Roberta, I see your hand up, but I'm going to skip for now because I want to give the opportunity for people who haven't spoken yet. So it's 2 people left, Sam Ho and then Eric Shaynauer. So Sam.
Thank you, Dave. I want to get a better clarification because I might have missed the part where it has to do with property owner and the constitutionality of this motion in relation to property owners of those land. If I'm clear of that and I'm confident of that, then I would fully support this motion, but that would be the major factor for me in the consideration. And if the property owner's land issue is not clear, I would not be able to support that. So can somebody help clarify that?
Yeah, I can, just to kind of reiterate, it's staff's understanding that the proposed land use changes would not result in a takings under law in terms of rendering those property owners property of zero value from the recommendations that we're making. and on kind of on a side note to follow up with Pat's question about the South Almaden Valley Urban Reserve, it's approximately 1,000 acres. So just wanted to note that on that question. And Sam, I hope I answered your question. We can try to add. We can try to add additional information if you need.
So mainly, it's constitutional.
Yeah, so our attorneys have said that cities have the legal right to change land use designations, and they often do it to increase the value of the land. For example, you take it from maybe a commercial land use designation to a high density land use designation. But occasionally we go the other direction, as is proposed here, where we take, in this case, an land that's designated for industrial park and designated for agriculture. But that's within, so I'm just relaying what we've had a conversation with the attorneys on, that's within our governmental powers. We can do that. What you can't do is make their land worthless. That's a taking. But in this case, it's not a taking because there's still an economic use of the land by changing it to agriculture.
That's
So
my question.
Will we be anticipating a litigation lawsuit relating to this if we proceed?
That's not a question for staff. We don't know. That's more of a question for the property owners, but we don't know.
Well, Sam, I'll just tell you this as an attorney. I do criminal law, but I would think in most decisions like this of this magnitude, it would be unusual if there aren't lawsuits. The issue here, I think we're all struggling with and trying to deal with is do a proper balancing here. Certainly it's proper and it's part of our American values to respect property rights. I think what staff is telling us essentially is the Constitution does not guarantee the highest and best use for any property owner. It guarantees an economic return or a fair return on the property. And ultimately, courts decide those things. I think the staff analysis here is, and I'll offer my own perspective at this point in time. We're not dealing with a situation where property has been developed or there are pending applications in a pipeline and investments made on the cusp of development. Coyote Valley has always been a very difficult area to develop, not just for the environmental and engineering reasons that have confronted property owners there, which are significant and expensive, but the city's own development standards here are probably more intense and at a higher level than any other part of San Jose. The industrial park designations here are completely different from Edenvale, from North San Jose. And they were made that way because this was viewed as a resource that was going to be available only for a very large campus industrial development. When the plan was developed for this in 1983 and 84, the city had thousands and thousands of acres of vacant industrial land in North San Jose and Edenvale. And so the argument was, why do we need to look at Coyote Valley when we have all these thousands of acres available for development? And the rationale was, this should be preserved for a very large corporate user who could not otherwise assemble the acreage that they needed, despite the acres and acres of vacant land in the other parts of the city. So when you look at the development regulations that are in existence right now, North Coyote had an average requirement of an average lot size of 100 acres. There were no pending developments like that. What prompted this was a proposal from a Silicon Valley company that no longer exists, Tandem Computers. The hope was maybe Apple might come here one day. I'll just make this comment. The interesting thing to me that's fundamentally different from the planning that occurred there is this whole notion that we could only get a big company by preserving or opening up Coyote Valley has been pretty much undermined now, where you have the very opposite thing happening. The biggest company in our valley, Google, has chosen a very different path of doing the very thing we thought no company would ever do, which would be assemble lots at great expense to themselves and cobble together their own campus, which they've done and are in the process of completing. And so that was the idea with Coyote. And for me, why I differ, I respect the views of the property owners out there, and Mr. Mattioni is probably the state's leading attorney on condemnation law and inverse condemnation law. Where I differ with him respectfully is that there was never an expectation, a real expectation from any of the property owners there that they had a major Fortune 500 company in their back pocket that was on the cusp of development. And until that happened, there wasn't going to be any development in the urban reserve. So for me, where I fall on this is there is a fair market value here in the agricultural use, and there was never a legitimate pending real expectation of more than that. Anybody who bought there was buying that. Really, I think I would agree with Shiloh. It was at some level of speculation and hope that the property development situation would ultimately change out there. I don't know if staff wants to add anything to that.
No, I think that's good, David.
Thank you. For personally, I would say that we do respect property ownership rights, and we got to do whatever we can to prevent them from having to take legal actions in the process. So if we were to put ourselves in their shoes, we would like to have things settled so that we don't end up spending money on legal processes. So that would be my reservation in the motion.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Eric? So I've got Eric as the last speaker here. Go ahead, Eric.
All right. Thank you, David. So I think preserving Coyote Valley as open space is a natural evolution of our city and our region. It's a natural evolution of our environmental policies. It's a natural evolution of our economy and the transformation of our economy. And it's a natural evolution of our politics and where our politics are today. So Coyote Valley will be preserved as open space. That's a foregone conclusion. But to get to Shiloh's question about are we doing enough to ensure that it's protected, I would argue there's another step to take, and that is to acquire all the land in Coyote Valley and put it in public ownership, because that's the only way that we can ensure that it is protected in perpetuity. It's the only way we can ensure that it's utilized for the benefit of the public, is if the public owns it. And so I think that is the right way going forward, is to have everyone who's on this call, who worked hard to pass Measure T, to redouble our efforts to find the funding to acquire all of the land in the valley. And it's a double benefit. It will ensure that the land is protected in perpetuity, which is what most people want. At the same time, it's the fair thing to do to compensate the property owners. As most people know, the two largest property owners got the benefit of receiving most, if not all, of the Measure T funds. So they got compensated. And the remaining small and medium-sized property owners have got nothing. So it seems like it would be fair to once this policy decision is made over the coming years, to work hard to find those funds through the Open Space Authority, through future bond measures, through grants from the state and elsewhere. And I think that's the biggest win-win. The public gets the land and the property owners get reasonably compensated. And just for the record, on the question of speculation, there are properties that are both general planned and zoned industrial. They're on Bailey, where a freeway interchange was built. And so to me, as someone who works in development, it's not highly speculative to have thought that industrial development would eventually occur someday. So in any case, I think the best win-win is have the public buy the land, preserve it forever, and treat all the property owners fairly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Roberta, so I don't see any more hands. Roberta, I'm going to call on you if you have something new or a question.
If we added that to the motion to buy the property at fair market value before it's rezoned, I would vote for it. I absolutely want this to pass. Every concern I've had, every concern I've heard, except for a few, have been about treating the property owners fairly. And I think we would get a more unanimous vote. There'd be less lawsuits if that were added. Thank you, Eric. You always say it best. I should wait till you go before me. Pat, you do too. And I want to add, Smita, I loved what you said. We even need it for our peace of mind. We can say we need it for the animals, which, and we do, but we need it for our peace of mind too. I really want this to pass. We can't take for the public good at the expense of just a few people. That's wrong. And we can't set that as a precedence. That's wrong. You wouldn't want it to happen to you. We shouldn't do it to others. So if we could add a friendly amendment that we do whatever we can to buy the land before it's rezoned, that would work. Or at least, yeah, go ahead. Would anyone accept the friendly amendment? No? No, okay.
All right, thank you, Roberta. Jeffrey Buchanan, I saw your hand raised. Oh, there it is. Okay.
I'll be brief, just because I think we see where things are going. Just, to the comments that have been made about, what we should be doing for these landowners and, how compensation should work. I mean, just to note, the city of San Jose makes decisions all the time on land use, some of which that, does quite a bit to enrich landowners, and the public is certainly not oftentimes the recipient of capturing that value. So I understand the concerns. If I was a landowner, maybe I would have some concern, but there's enormous public benefit, and I think you've heard from all so many members of the public, so many members of this task force, what the value of these changes will be, and I think it seems fairly obvious that value certainly outweighs the limited development opportunities that would be presented on these sites. From what I've heard, the only real economic development opportunities that could work in some of these sites would be things like an Amazon distribution center, and for that type of model, it's a lot of low wage jobs. It's companies that, when you look in this kind of e-commerce fulfillment space, that have bad records when it comes to things like wage theft, things like occupational health and safety. All that to say, I think the motion on the floor is making the move in the right direction when we're talking about the public good, and I trust that staff has thought through any of the legal implications around this, and I think we should move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just do want to add just a little bit more perspective on this, and this has been a big part of my life for quite a while. Bob and I go back to being environmental studies students at San Jose State University, both interested in the environment. I went from there, really, that's why I got involved in city government. And one of my first jobs was to work with Mayor McHenry. And I remember working on this memo seeing this map with jobs on the north end, urban reserve in the middle, and a non-urban reserve at the end. And that was influenced by Gary Schoenauer, Eric's dad. And that influence made its way into the mayor's proposal. And at that particular time, I wasn't in 100% agreement with it, I'll just say that, but it made sense for the city of San Jose at that time because it was a bedroom community. We desperately wanted to see a major mature Silicon Valley company come to San Jose. There was a fair argument that was being made that they wouldn't necessarily go to North San Jose or Edenvale, and this was the place. And what we have learned over 30 or 40 years now is that's not true anymore. It's just not true. And we've seen the exact opposite with Google and other companies in the north part of the valley. And we've changed from manufacturing and so on to more higher density development. The other thing that's changed that everyone's commented on is the world. The climate's different. It's a serious issue and we need to do our part. Remember, all politics is local. It might be hard to change things in China, but we can start in our own corner of the world. It might be even hard to change things in Washington, D.C. these days. Hopefully that's going to change soon. But we can change things in our own corner of the world. And this is a plan that makes sense. And it's not, we know, I think it really makes sense because so many people have been part of this change in direction and view. All the people, Megan, in that letter, that of all the groups that have been involved in that, many of the people on this task force, Margie, you worked closely with Susan on the whole green belt line and the green line in the city to try and draw a future. Eric, your dad, Linda, Pat's always been a kind of a very reasoned development person in the city, and generations of planning staff have got us to this point. It is truly historic, and I do, certainly care for the property owners there. But what we have to do in terms of balancing and making decisions is think about the long-term health of the city and the long-term vision that we want for the city. And that's the exact staff recommendations that have been made. So I'm going to stop with this speech. I do want to draw attention to recommendation 6 on page 17 regarding North Coyote Valley. And that was to add an action item to the general plan to move the urban service area boundary north, consistent with the proposed land use changes in North Coyote. So with these land use designations, we want to make sure the urban service boundary moves consistent to the new urban service, the new urban boundary. And Megan, the one thing I wanted to bring to your attention that might not be clear is we have basically, I think it's a city law that was part of an initiative that and I fully supported this when I was on the city council, that we only move that boundary during a major update to the general plan. And that was for good reason. It was for the reason we didn't want major environmental decisions made on the whim of an annual general plan review. That if we were going to make adjustments like that, that should be part of a comprehensive review. I still support that, but I think it was always with the fear that it was going to move past a hillside, or it was going to move and open up a new area, not retract it. And so if I think in terms of what Shiloh asked you, which I did want to mention at that time, I would suggest that with respect to item 6, that we add language that we add an action item to the general plan to move the urban service area boundary north, as soon as possible, consistent with the proposed land use changes. So I'd add that language as soon as possible, because what we don't want to do is have agricultural land use designations and wait for 4 or 6 years or whatever it may be, and have that urban service boundary still in the middle of Coyote Valley. We should have a very clear, consistent message. So I know the staff has to work within the constraints of city law. I'm sure the council can deal with that, but if you would be open to some language like that, I think that would be very consistent with the direction you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm able to accept that friendly amendment. Thank you.
Okay.
I think that's
And
an
Bob?
excellent idea. I accept as well.
And you do that as a fellow student from San Jose State? with me?
Yes, absolutely.
Me too. 2008.
Really? Oh, okay. We won't say the year we graduated. All right. We're going to do a roll call vote on this. So let's start with the yeses. Take the time. You're going to vote yes by putting your hand up as if you were asking to speak. So go ahead, for all the yeses, go ahead and do that now.
Can we put our hands up again?
Yeah, I don't think I'm able to as a co-host, but staff, would you count my hand as up? We're going to do it on just on the participant list. Ray, were you able to do that? Whatever you want to do? No? Okay. So let's do this first. We're going to count the hands first. Then I'm going to go to anybody who wasn't able to get their hand up there. You can indicate to staff if you're a yes. So I'll wait for staff to tell me after they've counted that.
David?
Just one moment, and I will take care of the counting, and I'll get to everybody after that.
I'm getting 23 yeses. Does Kulon or anyone else on staff have anything different than that?
What it says on the big board.
Perfect. Yep, that lines up.
Okay.
Next. There are people that said they were voting for yes, but they don't have their hand up. So I just want to note that.
I can't raise my hand.
Okay, Michelle, you were the one noting. Okay.
And
Yes, I can't raise my hand.
Okay, Michelle's one of those. Anybody else? Ray, you were able to get your hand up. I saw that. Was there anybody else who wants to vote yes? And as I mentioned, I'm a yes vote. I can't put my hand up as a co-host, but that's where I am. Okay.
David?
Yes.
For the ones that were not able to raise their hands, maybe you could just read out their names and then everyone, and then that just becomes a yes or a no, because
yes,
all the yeses. Okay.
Okay. So myself, Bob Levy, Megan Fluke, Vince Rocha, Andre Lutard, Jason Sue, Linda Lazat, Margie Matthews, Tamiko Rast, Leslie Corsilia, Smita Patel, Bonnie Mace, Teresa Alvarado, Susan Butler Graham, Nate LeBlanc, Jeffrey Buchanan, Jesus Flores, Harvey Darnell, Shiloh Ballard, Sylvia Arenas, Councilmember Arenas, Ray Bramson, Luis Arguello, Eric Schoenauer, Juan Estrada, Sam Ho, Michelle Yesney. Is there anyone who's voting yes whose name I did not call? Okay, let's clear the board. Can staff do that or? We could all clear that. Okay, the participant panel's been cleared. Okay, now if you're voting no, please indicate by raising your hand and we'll read that out aloud as well. All right, so I have Michael Van Avery, Sean Milligan, Carl Lee, Roberta Moore, Jim Zito, Pat Sacedo. Anyone else who wishes to vote no? Okay, so that's 6 votes no, the motion prevails. Okay, thanks very much, staff, for that work and for everyone else involved in the issue. I do share Eric's concerns about working together in the future with the property owners to, especially on the credit program, to see what opportunities there might be to help ameliorate economic impacts. Okay, so let's go to the staff recommendation on redistribution of planned growth. We've had the presentation on that. It was a while ago,
David, we're half an hour over. Is this going to go really quick, or can we?
It's going to go really quick.
Okay, well, I have a motion, so let me know.
Go ahead, Leslie Corselia.
Hi, everybody. I would just like to make the motion.
Honest man, Darla. Everybody make sure you're on mute unless you're talking.
Second, Michael Van Avery.
Okay, wait, Michael, let me make the motion. So I'm gonna, is everyone on mute? Okay, I'm gonna accept the staff recommendation to add 12,619 units of new residential capacity to the downtown. But understanding that this is a long-term vision, just want to make sure that we continue to assess the need for additional residential capacity during each general plan for your review going forward to ensure that we have much needed housing development and that it's not limited by artificial capacity limits. And just want to state, that's the motion, but just want to state again that if we've learned anything through this process, it's the dire need that we ensure that we have housing and affordable housing throughout the city, and that it's going to take the city staff's continued proactive engagement to respond to this need and realize the vision. And we believe that this shift in capacity will not accommodate the needs and opportunities of the future, but right now we believe that this is the action that we should be taking and that we just need to continue to be vigilant, about rethinking this as we go forward. So with that, I recommend approval of the staff recommendation as long as we recognize that we have to continue to work on this.
Okay, and just before we get a second on that, so Leslie, it's the staff recommendation that's in the overview memo on page 18.
I will assume it is. I don't have that in front of me. But yes, the staff recommendation to add 12,619 units of new residential capacity to the downtown.
Okay, and the neighborhood business districts. and the Story Road Urban Village and the Capitol Caltrain Station as indicated in the staff report? Correct?
Yes, the staff recommendation, yes.
And then you're also saying that with each 4-year scope of work to explore opportunities for more housing?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, the motion's been stated. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, who was that?
Does the motion include the jobs capacity
Ray,
shift?
Ray seconded the motion. A question from Jason?
Does the motion include the jobs capacity shift, or is it just?
We did the jobs capacity shift as part
As
of.
part of the first one.
Yes,
Okay.
isn't that correct, staff? Jared?
Yeah, at least the last motion would have addressed the 35,000 jobs from Coyote Valley, but there are other proposed job capacity shifts outside of that are detailed on the table in the staff report or in the memo.
Okay. Would that be table 2?
Correct. Table 2 on page 19.
All right. So that is that included in your motion as well, Leslie?
Yes, it is.
All right. And Ray, do you agree? Thank you. Questions, discussion on the motion? I've got Bob Levy.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I find actually this one, the last one, very easy to decide on, but this a little harder because the devil's in the details, and I'm not really sure how these allocations occurred. You know, the first question is, why are we not having a pool concept on jobs like we do with housing? And I'll ask all my questions up front. I have 4 of them, and so you can ask, staff can answer. And then why are not more of the allocations going to the 2 BART station areas, Little Portugal and Berryessa? Why are none of the allocations going to South County, Edenvale, to accommodate the reverse commute that some people have talked about earlier? And finally, I was the co-chair for the urban village on Stevens Creek Boulevard. And although I have really high hopes for, you know, development and density on Stevens Creek, the transportation network's not there yet to support it. So I'm curious why 4,000 of those jobs are going to Stevens Creek. So I'm definitely a little concerned about how these allocations were made.
Okay, Jared, can you, or Michael, can you respond to that?
Sure. Yeah, so for the pool pool concept recommendation, yeah, with jobs, we just don't see a need for a pool of jobs. We think that the different growth areas in the city and the allocations that they have and that we're proposing would provide adequate jobs where there's not a need to pool those. The neighborhood village pool policy that we're proposing is to kind of deal with some of the neighborhood urban villages where you have very little planned growth capacity. So it's a way to still facilitate housing in various areas of our city. But for jobs, we don't have that particular issue. In terms of where the movement of jobs for looking at Berryessa, BART, or Edenvale, for Edenvale, same, you know, we took a look at the jobs planned in Edenvale, and we feel like there's plenty of capacity there to accommodate future growth in the Edenvale employment areas. Berryessa, BART, we're currently planning for urban, we're going through an urban village planning process right now. And so we've done some pretty extensive capacity studies through that process, and have found that there's actually more than enough jobs that we've planned for in that BART station to accommodate future growth. And Little Portugal would be the same thing. However, I would mention too, we are going to be relooking at, well, particularly the 5 Wounds urban village, the 5 Wounds BART urban village plan next year with VTA's adoption of their playbooks that we participated in. We'll be revisiting that plan and looking to kind of align the city and VTA's goals there. So there'll be opportunities for looking at our BART stations, particularly at Five Wounds and around the Little Portugal area. Stevens Creek, this was in response to recent entitlements, particularly the Fort Bay Signature Project, the Stevens Creek Promenade Project. And so we looked at, based on those entitlements and the amount of growth we've kind of, the amount of growth, particularly around the Stevens Creek and Santana Row, Valley Fair area, we wanted to ensure that development would be able to proceed in West San Jose there. But understanding, your concerns about transit.
Anything further, Bob?
No, I appreciate the feedback. I wasn't really expecting too much of a detailed answer. I'm still on the fence on this one as far as voting for the motion.
Okay. I think to keep in mind, these are adjustments. It's not that any of these areas lacked jobs. We're just reallocating jobs based on the changes, principally in Coyote Valley. Okay, Andre, did you have a question?
Well, I still have a concern about, all the folks who live in these far-flung residential neighborhoods that are single family. They're not gonna move. Some people are not gonna move. Most people are not gonna want to move downtown. So they're still gonna have to get in their cars and drive someplace to get to their jobs. And if we want to reduce the vehicle miles traveled, we've got to figure out how to get those jobs closer to where people are already living, not just where folks might live in the future. Otherwise, we're just going to perpetuate the same residential sprawl that has been going on for years. So
do you have
I'm
a
concerned
suggestion?
about this because I don't see that this addresses a sort of a institutional or systematic baseline that isn't going to change.
Okay. Sean Milligan.
Yeah, I strongly support Leslie's motion to concentrate development in downtown. KT Urban's been an active participant in redevelopment of downtown San Jose, developing over more than 3,000 residential units, a 272 unit hotel, and we're currently in the process of developing 1.2 million square feet of office in the downtown core. But I've got to say, and this might be opportunistic, but many people on this call were supportive of the commercial linkage fee in downtown. And I can't help but take the opportunity to suggest that the commercial linkage fee will retard the ability to allow commercial office to be constructed in downtown San Jose. With that said, I'm supportive of Leslie's motion on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Margie?
Yes, I'd like to ask Leslie the same question, if she could include the friendly amendment similar to the last item, since 5,000 new job capacity is slated for Alviso, to explore that a little deeper and to work with the community on this particular part of the motion.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ray, do you agree? Ray Bramson? Okay, thank you. Yes, he indicated yes. All right, I don't see any more hands up. I think the most efficient way to vote is to vote as we did last time. Do that by simply putting a hands up at this point in time. If you support the motion that Leslie has made, indicate that now on the participant list. And I'll start reading that out for the record. I'm including myself, Patricia Cicedo, Megan Fluke, Jason Sue, Eric Schaenauer, Michael Ben Avery, Bonnie Mace, Leslie Corsilia, Teresa Alvarado, Linda Lazat, Ray Bramson, Tamiko Rast, Susan Butler Graham, Harvey Darnell, Sean Milligan, Margie Matthews, Jim Zito, Sam Ho, Jeffrey Buchanan, Nate LeBlanc, Juan Estrada, Roberta Moore, Jesus Flores, Smita Patel, Councilmember Arenas, Michelle Yesney, Luis Arguello, Carl Lee, Vince Rocha. And that's everyone who is a yes. Was there anyone else who's a yes whose name I did not call? Okay. All those in opposition to the motion, please indicate, well, let's clear this board quickly if we can. Thank you. Okay, almost there. Okay. Thank you. All those in opposition to the motion, you can indicate that now by raising your hand. Okay, and I see Andre Lutard. Anyone else? All right, thank you. So the vote will be noted. Yes, we did go over the timeline, but we have, by doing that, we have one meeting left. So this was an important meeting and better to stay focused if we could. So thanks, everybody. I guess a lot of people have gone and sat through this meeting without eating dinner. Try to have something healthy before you go to sleep. Stay healthy. And we'll see you all at our next and last meeting next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Night.
Good
Bye,
night.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Good job, Dave.
Stay healthy. Good job.
Thank you so much, Dave.